Welcome all. It is 5 minutes past 7, so let's get started. I am Ted Guthrie, Chair of ANC 1C and represent Single Member 1C03, the heart of Adams Morgan between Biltmore and Wyoming and 18th and 19th. I'd ask my fellow commissioners to introduce themselves, starting with our newest member at the far right.
John Sotoli, ANC 1C04, about Lanier Heights, maybe near Walter Pierce Park.
Hi, my name is Jacob Bowles. I'm a 1C07 and I am the western side of the Reed Cook neighborhood.
I'm Bridget Pooley, 1C02, Calorama Triangle.
I'm Michaela Wright, 1C06, the northeastern corner of Adams Morgan.
Amanda Perry, 1C08, sort of southeast portion of 1C.
Beekman Place and places adjacent.
Beekman Place.
And two of our members are out of town and were unable to be here tonight. So, moving to the officers' report, I don't have anything to report as chair. Secretary.
Just last month's minutes.
That's okay.
I'd like to move to consider last month's minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any comments, discussion on the draft minutes? Audience? No? Okay.
You can always find them on the website.
Then we can just move to vote, correct?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
I believe I have to abstain, I was not there.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 0 to 1.
Sorry?
Is Johnny
Yes.
on last month's minutes? I guess.
Moving then to the treasurer's report.
All right, I've got two items. First, just wanted to share that last month we did approve a $1,000 grant to Platform of Hope, so that payment went out. We had our regular other quarterly taxes, Mary and FedEx, and we also spent another $600 on live streaming equipment, so we are fully equipped to live stream, and we are doing, I think, our third live stream today. So that link was shared on Nextdoor, the listserv, which is no more, and elsewhere. In turn, other business from the treasurer, I would like to move that we approve the quarterly financial report for FY19, closing out last fiscal year. Q4, you all commissioners should have that in your packets. Did I make that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to move that we approve this. Do I have any, do I have a second?
Second.
And any questions from commissioners or the public about our quarterly expenses? All right, all those in favor of approving our Q4 financial report for FY19 indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
6 to 0 to 0.
Great.
And you need us to sign.
I will pass it around for signatures.
Next, we move on to a resolution in support of a consent agenda for regular meetings of the commission. And I'll turn it over to Japer to lead the discussion or to explain what this is about.
Yeah, so we have discussed this since beginning, I believe, the August meeting is when it was first brought up. And we've continually had discussions and tweaked the proposed bylaw changes, but essentially we're interested in adding a consent calendar to our bylaws, and this would work with proper notice given and for things and items that would fall under ANC jurisdiction and consideration that are unanimous in nature and are also routine in nature. They're pretty common amongst other boards listed in the resolution. 1A, 1B, 2B, 3C, 3D, 4A, 6C, 6D, and 7E are other advisory neighborhood commissions that use this. And we are interested in adding it to our bylaws, that way for transparency purposes and for long-term stability, we're able to use this common process to really spend our time on focusing on things that the community can give more voice to. One of the things that was brought amongst other commissioners, not just in our commission, but other ANCs in general amongst the debate, is how effective are meetings and do they really focus their time on things that actually matter. And so this is a procedure to hopefully highlight and maximize the time for issues that really matter to the community and also maximizing the efficiency of the commission. I will highlight, so essentially what happens is there's numerous types of items that can be put on a consent agenda, and I would advise this commission, as well as any other organization that starts to use this process, to start with easier things that, like I said, repeat constantly, such as minutes. But reading through the list, some types of things that could be found on a consent agenda are committee meeting minutes, ANC financials, chairman reports, committee reports, staff, volunteer, committee appointments, correspondence that requires no action, resolutions honoring or acknowledging a person, place, thing, event, and perfunctory items or formal approval of items that have had much past discussion. There are ways for the public to get engaged and to bring up discussion. So say you see something on the agenda and you're like, this is on the consent agenda, I want to know more about that. In our bylaws, there will be an opportunity for you to voice that either opposition to remove it and to have further discussion for the commission. And that again is one of the safeguards to the power that the chair will have to initiate this process. So in our bylaws, anyone in the public will be allowed. Other consent agendas that are in rules, they typically have commissioners ask, but we felt at least starting off, we would allow anyone who has a question to be able to voice their concerns, and then it would be placed on our normal, regularly scheduled agenda. Right then and there, we would discuss when to discuss it. So there, let's see, the other major, I guess, notice requirements. According to DC law, we have to provide 10 days to notice the community of a meeting. Our bylaws and DC law also states that we have to follow our own bylaws. So most ANCs create stricter laws than that, bylaws than that, and ours requires a 10-day notification, and there are instances, and this is referenced within the whereas clauses, but also in the very end of the bylaw proposal, it mentions an exemption, and that relates to notice requirements for certain items that would be on the consent calendar. This reason being, minutes are commonly put on consent agenda items, and we are typically not notifying the public of previous committee minutes for these things. The publicly given resolution and then the resolution that is given to the commissioners does not have that specific change, but rather states items on the consent agenda are required to follow Article 7, Section 6, except in situations where it is impossible to provide advance notice. I would like to add, I would like to have a friendly amendment to my own resolution and change that, the language of except in situations where it is impossible to provide advance notice, to subject to the exemptions provided in Article 7, Section 10. A former ANC committee chair brought to our attention that there is already a clause Within our bylaws, section 10, which states exemptions for agendas of regularly scheduled meetings of the commission, which further states that the commission may deliberate on and vote on a matter as new business as a regularly scheduled meeting, even if the matter was not previously identified to the community as provided above in Article 7, but only if A, all commissioners and community members give it as much advance noticeable as possible, as reasonable under certain circumstances, and the commission first passes a vote that affirms either that it would be adverse to the community to vote on the matter at the time, or that it would be adverse to the community not to vote at the matter at the time. So there were concerns amongst commissioners about that last clause. And I believe with this last amendment, commissioners.
Could you read the change again, the subject to exemptions?
Yeah, certainly. So the full sentence is, items on the consent agenda are required to follow Article 7, Section 6. And then the specific change is, instead of exempt, you're going to replace that from there to put subject to the exemptions provided in Article 7, Section 10.
Thank you. And also, I believe you were going to make a friendly amendment change in the initial part of the resolution.
Yes.
To extract the word impactful.
Yes, I will change that not only in this resolution, but in future resolutions.
I appreciate that. So do we have anyone who's got concerns to express about this? I believe that this answers both of the principal concerns that were expressed by one of the community members who isn't here. Yes, Benet.
Yeah, I know I haven't been around, for a while at the ANC meetings, and this is my first time I'm, reading the resolution and stuff. I'm just a little concerned about, your desire of changing the system that has been working way before even you were born. So I'm just.
The idea is to get our meetings tightened up as much as we can so that we can spend more time on things that really are controversial and people have something to say about them.
Okay.
Because any member of the public or commissioner can object to having something on the consent calendar, if there is a problem with something that is on the consent calendar, that can be bumped to the regular discussion. But we're hoping that this saves maybe 15, 20 minutes a meeting, which would be great.
Right, okay. I just want to make sure because, I know some of the meetings can be very long, and I totally understand that. I just want to make sure that the goodwill of the community and the constituents are being taken care of, and that this resolution is not going to weaken the ANC power and the possibility of the public to intervene at the meetings. That's one thing that I want to make sure that we're still protected.
Nope.
Okay.
Anyone could raise their hand and say, I'd like to have this item removed from the consent agenda.
Okay. The second thing is.
They do have to get here before we consider the consent agenda, but,
Well, I think they could contact us by email.
no, that's true, that's
Didn't we
true.
say that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody could email if they didn't feel
The
comfortable.
second thing is about the time. So the RANC years ago decided to give like 10 days, even though the law specifically states that it's 7 days, which is being used by other ANC in town. So this is the part I don't understand about the 10 days and the 7 days with the new resolution. Is there anything that's going to change on that? So please.
Under the ANC law, you're required to give notice that a meeting will occur. You're not required to give notice of all items that will be on the agenda. And this came up, and I consulted with Gottlieb about it with a previous case where a developer claimed that they didn't get actual notice that we were going to be considering an item to appeal. And BZA said in the first place that they didn't want to have anything to do with it, but Gottlieb's take on it was that we can amend the agenda for any meeting during the meeting, and that we don't have to give 10-day notice or 7-day notice of items that are going to be on the agenda. Where the attitude that the ANC has taken as long as I've been on it is that we give notice as soon as we possibly can and try to make sure that everyone knows what's happening before it happens. And I don't think that this will have any impact on that at all.
Okay, all right, so I just want to make sure that this resolution is for the positive of the community.
Yeah.
And, protection, because I know that all those years, the government has been trying to weaken the role and the power of ANC, and I'm very sensitive about
Oh, it has absolutely no impact on the power of the ANC. Absolutely
and
not.
community input.
Community input, I believe, is well protected by this provision the way it
All
is.
right, thank you so much.
Any other questions, concerns? Commissioners? Let's move to a vote. All those in favor of the resolution, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Jen.
Excited.
And I noticed that we don't have one item on the agenda that should have been put on the agenda that's sort of an administrative thing that I would like to take up at this point, which is that as we have a new commissioner, we need to assign the new commissioner some committee responsibilities. And I would, even though it's not on the agenda, I would move that we add this to the agenda because it would be contrary to the interests of the community not to have Commissioner Zatoli be involved actively. That would be necessary if we didn't let him be on a committee to vote. So could I have a second to my motion to add this to the agenda?
Second.
And any discussion? Any concerns?
You're on a committee.
All those in favor of the waiving the notice requirement for adding Commissioner Zatoli to a committee, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Moving then to the substance. With Commissioner Zatoli's consent, because we don't ever force someone to do something, I would move that Commissioner Zatoli be added to the Public Services and Environment Committee. And do I have a second?
Second.
From the chair.
Yeah.
Any discussion? All of those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion passes unanimously. Moving then to commissioner announcements. Staple. Yeah. Commissioner announcements and committee meeting agendas. Which actually leads to another one that didn't get on this but should have. We need to make a slight administrative change to our committee assignments because in both November and December, we have a problem with only 2 spaces available because of the holidays for Wednesday night meetings. So we can't have all 3 committees both months. And after discussion among the commissioners, I believe the decision was to take out ABC in November and have a combined ABC and Public Service and the Environment in December. Is that correct?
I think
Is
that's
that
correct.
consistent with what everybody? And so that we will not be having a committee meeting the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, because who in their right mind would be here? And we will not be having one on Christmas. And in addition to which, the first meeting of the new year will not be on January 1st, because too many people are either recovering or watching football. Instead, it will be the following week. So it will be the
8th.
the 8th of January. So I would move that we make those changes to the official schedule of the ANC. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? So next week's meeting will be a PZT meeting. The following week's meeting will be a Public Service and Environment Committee. The next week is Thanksgiving and there will be no meeting. Then the December ANC meeting is the first Wednesday. The second Wednesday will be ABC and Public Service and the Environment, and the third Wednesday will be PZT, assuming that we have agenda items for those. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
All those,
there are enough Wednesdays in January to not have to move anything
Right.
aside from just shifting it all back
Yeah,
a week.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Resolution 2 right now. Is that getting wrapped up in this too?
The January. meeting.
sure that the January committee meetings bump back a week from their normal schedule. Although because it will be a new yearly schedule, we'll be having one, so we don't need to add that. We'll be having one that outlines what the dates are for the committees.
Oh, yeah, okay, right.
Okay?
Could you just repeat that again, November, December?
November meetings, no ABC. Next week will be PZT. The following week will be Public Service and the Environment. In December, the second Wednesday will be ABC and Public Service and the Environment. And the next Wednesday after that, the third Wednesday of December will be PZT, assuming there are agenda items on those December meetings. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Turning then to commissioner announcements and committee meeting agendas. Let's start on your end.
Okay. I guess my first news that all the commissioners know and many of you know is I will be leaving the ANC, moving. Very sad. But yes, so that'll be at some point before the end of the year. So yeah, we will have to figure out next steps for filling my spot. In terms of planning, zoning, and transportation committee, I don't believe we have anything on the agenda at this point.
Huh.
I'll be requesting stuff.
What, I'm not sure why Wawa was planning to come. Does anyone know, to the ABC?
Oh, yeah, they wanted to talk.
I think it was to discuss 18-wheelers parking in the middle of the street. And
Okay.
they also want to introduce themselves.
Yeah,
Well,
but
since
they
planning,
have
zoning, and
PZT
transportation-
on the 20th. That's
What?
what Amir's email says. Wawa's GM Chanel Diggs will attend PZT on the 20th. So you have to swap
So we'll have to do public service and the environment on the 13th.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes, we need another.
Oh my God.
I would move that the Public Service and Environment Committee be the 13th and the Planning, Zoning, and Transportation be the 20th of November.
I'll second that.
Yeah, second.
That's okay, that's okay.
Yeah, a change in the November schedule. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Is everyone clear? I'm not clear either. So could someone get a hold of Wawa and let them know that
Amir already has.
he's confirmed it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why he wanted to do it.
Okay,
on the
so
20th.
they're gonna be on the 20th.
Yeah.
Okay? And do we have anything for public service and environment?
I have a flavored tobacco products
Okay, cool.
resolution, and then we were hoping to, for the other, or do you want me to do it in committee announcements?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, we have stuff.
Okay. That's it. My only announcement is about the Marie Reed Fall Farm Share, which takes place on Mondays between 3 and 6 p.m. If you go to Marie Reed Elementary School, you can buy a great box of fruit and vegetables. They're partnering with Fresh Farm and Sweet Green, and that goes on until December 11th. And another thing I learned from our education meeting last month at the PSC meeting is that you can link your Amazon account for everyone who's ready to do a bunch of holiday shopping. You can add Marie Reed Elementary as your charity, and the school will earn money on all your purchases. And then also, if you do a lot of grocery shopping at Harris Teeter, you can tie your VIC card to Marie Reed and help them earn money on all of your grocery shopping. So, and you can do that on harristeeter.com. That's it.
What was the first card before your speaking?
Amazon.
I don't have it.
I have a couple things, and I'm sorry if these are onerous, but I think they're interesting. So, DDOT's having a Ward 1 open house on Saturday, November 16th. So if you have questions about DDOT's work in the ward, you can talk to them from 12 to 2. It's a Saturday at Columbia Heights Community Center, 1480 Girard Street. Congresswoman Holmes Norton is doing 2 forums that I think are interesting. One is on affordable housing. That's at 19th Street Baptist Church on 16th Street on November 19th. And then she's also doing her quarterly National Park Service meeting. I'll be at that one. For those of you who are interested in the work that's happening at Walter Pierce Park, we run into a lot of issues being able to do anything with National Park Service. I'm under no pretenses that I'll get answers at that meeting, but maybe I'll at least get some more information. There's also 2 conversations happening with the OAG about civil rights and discrimination in DC. That's next Wednesday and Thursday, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. I also wanted to mention a former commissioner reached out about sharing a loss that happened on October 27th, so I think it was not last week but the week prior, at our local firehouse. Alex Graham passed away. He was the firefighter of the year in 2018, and speaking of Ms. Holmes-Norton, she will be making a congressional record statement about his service on Friday. About his service to the community on Friday. His funeral service will be on Thursday. That's tomorrow at 10 a.m. at DC Armory if anyone's interested. The other thing is Commissioner Dendy is not here today, but she did ask that I introduce a resolution on her behalf. It's not on the agenda, so before we wrap up for the end of the day, if I could add that. Okay, that's all I've got.
Make
Thank
sure
you.
you nudge me.
I will.
Was there a date for the Walter Pierce Park meeting?
Yes, that meeting is on November 14th, and that's at the Anacostia Operations Facility of the U.S. Park Police.
So convenient.
So convenient.
Dennis, do you have a question?
Is it permissible to ask a question about the announcement?
Sure.
May I ask what issues related to Walter Pierce Park and National Park Service
Yes.
are on your mind?
I have a couple issues, particularly about Walter Pierce Park. So if you're familiar with the bricked path that extends from Calvert Street into the park, during the winter, throughout the year it floods. And during the winter especially it ices over and it's pretty treacherous. DDOT and DPR have told me that they're not able to do anything about it, so that is one question I have in particular. I've also had a number of constituents reach out across the street from there in my SMD. My SMD borders national park land, and I've had a number of constituents ask about trash pickup and maintenance, so mowing and that type of thing, which I can get answers for on the DC side, but I don't always know where to go for the national park side. So those are a couple of the issues in particular. But I'd be happy to bring anything.
Well,
if-
that grading question where the path goes very low before it goes back to
Yeah.
the dog park is a big problem. And
Yeah.
DPR would like to do something, but it's not their property.
Right. So this is her forum for people in the city to raise issues that they have with the National Park Service. So I figured this could be my opportunity to ask about it. Cool.
Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll do PS.
So the DDOT meeting that Bridget referenced on November 16th, I think that's Saturday, they're gonna be talking about a number of cross-ward projects, not just Ward 1 specific. The meeting is designed for Ward 1 residents, but they're gonna be talking about the 16th Street bus lanes project, which goes from Ward 4 to Ward 2, and should start construction this spring. I think the 100% designs were supposed to be ready about now. And they're hoping to have construction starting in the spring. So for folks that are interested in that, it's been going on for a long time, but there haven't been meetings about it recently, so people might want to come out and hear about that. And also there is the crosstown cycle track is also going to be discussed at that meeting. And there's a couple other things too that I can't remember, but and it's an open house. There's no program, so you can just come and ask questions and look at the boards. There's no actual presentation.
Cool. Okay, so I will start off with Public Services and Environment Committee. Right now for the, I guess, the next PS&E committee, the only thing that I have is a resolution in favor of the flavored tobacco ban. That is a bill that's sponsored by DC Council. However, the December meeting, we will likely be getting speakers from the Department of Aging and Community Living, and try to have a forum and see what type of resources our seniors have from DC, and especially on the holiday time. I know that it's good to learn about those different types of resources and volunteer opportunities. Those are the things that I have for, and then the Colorado Park erosion, if they are, whichever meeting
It
they're
sounds
able
like
to
they
come
might be
to.
coming.
I do have a meeting with them directly on Friday. I believe Bridget will also be there. But we're really pressing to get them to come to a public meeting because Colorado Park erosion it's just been like an ongoing process, and don't feel like there's proper feedback. They're not listening to the community or even us at this point.
Yeah.
So that will hopefully before the end of the year, but it's like every other week we have a
I did get a
conflict.
positive email today about it. So.
You did? Okay. And then personally, I will be asking Chairperson Fox Perry if I could add a resolution in support of a traffic pattern study at the intersections of 18th and Florida. I'm sure as many of you know, the northbound traffic and the southbound traffic, particularly the southbound traffic on 18th Street, taking a left onto U Street in Florida causes all types of insane traffic and logs and unsafe walking, biking, all of it. It's terrible. There's plenty of evidence. I'm sure when you walk south of our ANC, you'll see how terrible it is as well. So we are interested in a traffic pattern study, and the reason why we're doing this in resolution form instead of just sending DDOT email is because we want to garner public support for this area. We also want the public to know that, hey, we've heard you, we've gotten a lot of emails about this, and it's not just our ANC that would have to approve something, but ANC 2B is directly south of us, and they're also on board, and we'll be working in conjunction with them to hopefully make an intersection that's safe for pedestrians, cyclists, scooter, and then for cars, and also buses. A bus takes a left and heads east there, and it always blocks.
Maybe moving them to
intersection.
Columbia Road would help.
Good idea.
Oh, there's some options around here.
Jeffrey, you know that this intersection has been rebuilt like a few years ago.
Has
Before
been
it was
what?
Rebuilt.
Yes,
This
exactly.
was even more dangerous because there was this car that lost control, ran into a pedestrian and a pizzeria.
When did Karen restaurant?
Yeah,
And there's a pedestrian island there.
This
Yeah,
whole
there's
thing has
definitely.
been rebuilt, so I don't know.
It's marginally better than it was.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's why we should probably continue to put pressure on it, because just because better doesn't mean it's actually best. There's still a lot of reports of people running.
Overpass.
Right, exactly. There's still a lot of reports of people running the stop sign, the stoplight there, stop sign, stop light. I mean, it's just not a very usable, and we think it's worth putting our voice behind, or I do. And
I do think it's important as you put a resolution together, that you acknowledge that there were changes made whenever that was.
Absolutely.
And
Part of the streetscape project, which ended in 2012.
yeah, because it's going to be much more persuasive, I think, if we acknowledge that there has been,
A historical.
like 7 years that we've lived with the new version, and it doesn't seem like it's a substantial improvement, and something needs to be done about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So Amir will be leading this one, but he's not here. So, but that butts against both of our districts, and like I said, we also had emails from people in 2B that. So
Well,
they're
and
working on
I
it as well,
anticipate now that, what's the name of the Jack Rose sister place?
Imperial.
Imperial. That Imperial has opened, that it's going to create even more congestion there, especially with people getting in and out of vehicles.
And the restaurant that's going to be there right at the
Right
corner of
behind it.
California
So,
and 18th.
Yep.
by the field.
sounds
It's-
like we could have a good discussion.
Exactly. So we're hoping to get that started, and then the comp plan. Oh yeah.
Last point, I know Amir's not here. I don't know how long this has been in the works, but can I just suggest that as you guys talk with each other, that, and I'll try to reach out to Amir, but say, when are you talking about having this conversation come up?
What do you mean?
You're talking about doing a resolution?
Yeah, so we do a resolution to hopefully spur the conversation of having them come out. Well,
So
there's.
you're gonna talk about this at the next PZT meeting?
Right, the
Yeah.
20th,
The when?
That
20th.
one is the 20th. No, that one is.
Yeah, it is the 20th. Because you're, Public Service and Environment is getting bumped to the 13th.
Okay.
Correct,
And then the 20th will be PZT.
correct.
And then the next one
That's the
is Thanksgiving, when everyone should be
Eating.
getting their
Exactly.
sweatpants on.
Yeah, so at the 20th.
Okay, I was
And we
just
welcome
gonna suggest
all.
some outreach to the folks who live on Vernon Street.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd love to hear.
I'm not 100% sure personally that I can be at the meeting on the 20th.
Yeah, just voice.
I can't, but,
Yeah, send us an email, voice your comments. I'm sure since living in that area, you see it often. So, and definitely solutions too.
One advice I could give you is if you could, because the work has been done 7 years ago, usually, it's hard for governmental agency to come back to their project they built because they think that it's working.
Well, that's not always the case,
Right,
but I
right.
just see that.
You see my point where I'm going. So what would be good in this resolution, if you could have witnesses who can give you specific problems and issues at the intersection that you can really put, and not just the regular blah blah,
Yeah, definitely. In a resolution, and
Yeah.
like in previous resolutions, I feel like we've tried to have specific examples.
evidence
But
of the
definitely.
situation and problems and what it entails, like examples of the problem, just to prove to DDOT, which is a difficult agency to deal with, why they will need to intervene in that specific intersection. So that would be great if you could gather those evidence or problems.
Yeah, I mean,
Facts.
at the PZT meeting, that's when we'll be doing a fact-finding mission.
I mean, the thing you can make an announcement, through the listserv, and having residents coming to not testify, but give you, some
Yeah.
information about that, what they have encountered.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm definitely interested in anyone's input. I believe Michaela's outreach on the listserv is detailed enough that it already mentions. But I can gladly come up with a little something.
Next door or so.
And actually, that's probably a bigger discussion, is moving a lot of our announcements to next door
Yeah.
as well.
Well, they're gonna be
I have it on there already.
co-announced.
Okay, cool.
Could I, just on this topic, can I throw in with these two? Could I suggest that you have a listening session before a resolution is created? Because, like, inviting some of those businesses who are most
Yeah.
affected too could be useful. I don't know if they can break away and come to an ANC meeting, but
Yeah, definitely. So that's something that, I'm interested in. Always more feedback. I don't necessarily know, like a town hall or like a listening session. At this point, wasn't necessarily a good idea. I think that amongst a group of 5 or 6 stakeholders, you probably get a general idea that DDOT just needs to come out and fix some stuff. But once there's a design ready, I definitely think further outreach, will be legally required, but also necessary just to be neighborly in fashion.
I would point out that what he is suggesting is a traffic study, which presupposes that there is no agenda that we're going, except that there's problems here and they need to fix it, rather than making a proposal of turn this lane into no left turn or
There's
something.
DDOT speak and then regular human speak.
Right.
And anyone can use 311 to do a traffic pattern study just on your app. Anyone.
Yeah.
So this is just saying, hey, we really want this to happen. It's been a continued concern. And then the last thing, we will be discussing the comp plan elements. I would like to put through at the PZT meeting elements of support. And then in the December meeting, I would like to look at elements that we would possibly like to change or have opposition to. The support seems like more of an easier thing rather than things that we would like to change.
I would like to suggest that any discussion of the comp plan include both pluses and minuses, because especially during holiday time, people may or may not be there, and I'd like to get more
Yeah, we can
input
do that. Yeah.
than not.
So could we do it where, either way, I want to have a resolution with the comp plan. Could we do a listening session specifically for pros and a listening session specifically for cons, and then you can come to either, but mostly just focus on one, or just two comp plan
I think most of the
meetings?
people will be for the
Just two
con.
comp plan meetings.
There's not that many people who will turn out to a meeting to say, yes, yes, you're doing a great job, last I saw. And so I would suggest,
Okay.
when is it that we need to have the thing in? Is it January?
January 31st.
Okay, so we can consider it at the first meeting in January substantively for the ANC, so if we had both,
Both meetings dedicated to
well,
making-
both meetings available with some time to discuss problems with,
Yeah,
yeah. And particularly if we could get some of our resident experts on comp plan and how it interacts with the community, that would be very helpful.
yeah, I can work with Amanda and find experts, expert S, and then we'll send out an email to beef this one up, because the comp plan happens every 10-ish years.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it has to be a fairly fast turnaround, because the first one is the 20th, which is just 2 weeks
Exactly, and
away.
they gave us notice. This is the first time that we're even able to, we just got the draft. So we're looking through it, coming through it now. And if you have questions or are interested in the comp plan, plandc.dc.gov, and that's all I have to say.
Can I add one thing to Jay first?
Sure.
Dee Dee Parker Wright, the executive director of Jubilee Jumpstart, indicated that she will be submitting a grant for consideration at the upcoming PSE meeting, just as an FYI. If you want to add that, PSE, yeah, to your
Jubilee
agenda.
Jumpstart?
Yes.
While we're on that committee, can I say something about,
Yeah.
is that appropriate?
Yeah.
So,
Is
it's
it-
24 chapters, 511 pages of amendments. It's kind of a big chunk.
Yeah, exactly.
Might need to be broken up into separate subject matters.
So I would say yay to that, but I just don't think that the community has latency at that time to do the comprehensive breakdown. And also, this has been a continued discussion for the past at least 2 years. And there's multiple, the mayor's office, the council members, they're also having numerous public and committee hearings. And so these meetings would be in hopes to actually vote on and come to a conclusion of what our community would want to stay.
Without it ever having been discussed. But, that's why I think you need to have some open discussions for people to sound off about the different elements.
Yeah, definitely.
But, I think, there was a subject matter that was discussed earlier tonight, and I'm going to say something which goes against what you all know I think about it. You should right now pass a resolution objecting to the Office of Planning holding the Ward 1 comp plan meeting
Right now.
tonight.
It's
know.
right now, yeah.
I emailed them about it to complain, and they've told us that, this doesn't help, but they've said that they're gonna share a recording with us, and that we might be able to attend another one. I know,
And I
it's
also
frustrating.
reached out and they suggested that we can attend the Ward 2 or
Yeah.
Ward 3 committee meetings.
Okay.
And Those dates are December 3rd for Ward 2 and December 7th for Ward 3. And they said that they're open to questions for Ward 1 as well. But that was definitely something that as soon as I said, I went up and told them, and they
Yeah.
still were like, we don't.
Yeah.
But, Ruben, yeah.
I was going to mention what you just said, but I also didn't.
So we have one last commissioner for announcements. Do we have any announcements other than welcome to be here?
I am happy to be here. The DC government is about to renew or not renew the rent control program. Anybody who lives in an apartment covered by rent control or would like to be in an apartment covered by rent control, this is a good time to weigh in. The DC Council is having a hearing on the rent control issue next week, and they'll be considering whether to renew the program and whether to expand it or modify it in some way. Be worth paying attention to. And anyone interested, I can give you more details.
Okay, moving then to public announcements, up to 2 minutes a person. And we'll hold up on the Pepco until that's done, if that's okay with the Pepco people. Where are the Pepco people? Yeah. Kristen?
I'm Kristen Barden. I'm the Executive Director of the Adams Roaring Partnership for our Business Improvement District. And I just want to do a quick recap of our October events and thank all of you for coming out and supporting our Porch Fest event, which was our largest turnout ever. We had 17 or 18 porches and over 60 performances. So it was our biggest yet, and I know I saw a number of the commissioners walking around that day. So thank you all for supporting it. It was really a tremendous event. In fact, we're thinking about maybe doing a smaller scale Porch Fest in the spring. So given its real popularity, we're trying to see if we can get enough sponsorship money to offset the cost of doing it, a smaller scale one in the spring. So it's really kind of becoming our signature event. So thank you all for supporting that. And also the Elm Festival. So we raised over $2,000 for Platform of Hope through the pie slice sales. And the slices were sold for $5 each. So people obviously were very generous and gave additional money. So that's how we were able to get up to a little over $2,000. And this is a smaller scale event that we do every fall in partnership with the Farmers Market. And there's heirloom apple tasting, and then the pie baking contest. And thank you, Commissioner Jeffrey, for being a judge for the pies. And we had fun. It was a really fun morning. We had Anya, who is Channel 4, was a judge, along with Tom Sherwood, and participant in the Platform of Hope program, and Ana Reyes from El Tamarito. So it was a great panel. It was a really fun morning. So I want to just thank everybody for coming out and participating. We'll be back to talk to you more once we figure out maybe a spring Porch Fest. And of course, we'll have our movie series coming up again in May. And we're doing some brainstorming tomorrow about some other events. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Kristen, I have a question for you. One of the things that we noticed this year about Porch Fest, it was held right around the same time as Open Streets, and it was interesting to come from Open Streets to Porch Fest to watch it and how people kind of spill out into some of the main streets. I wonder if there could be any community conversation about, especially along Lanier, it turns into a battle between Porch Fest goers and cars, and I wonder if we could try to do some strategic block closures. There was certainly some reflection on Twitter, so just something to think about for next year too.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, we try to avoid those kinds of things because it creates a whole other level of bureaucracy. But the event might be of that size now.
Yeah, I mean, I think about Lanier in particular, and maybe it's something that the community could do. Some of the residents on Lanier, if enough people could get together to do it and take that off of you. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That would be a lot easier.
Yeah. Just wanted to say it while it was fresh, but thanks for organizing.
Yeah, I know we had some music bleed because of the closeness of some of the porches. So we also need to work on spacing those out a little bit more so that you can really hear each musician. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yes.
Hi everybody. My name is Allie Bobek. I'm new position Constituent Services Coordinator for Brianna Doe's office. So I will be now serving 1C. We're fully staffed, so we should be able to get to all of your concerns a lot faster. So just kind of updates from our office is that we're fully staffed in constituent services. That we also have an update on safety funding. I know it's a large concern for a lot of people in Ward 1, so that's in the back. And then we're having an event this Saturday. It's not in 1C, but I thought it might be of interest. It's called the Lower Georgia Avenue Equitable Development Project. So what's this going to be? It's going to be an initiative that looks holistically at the resources, concerns, and opportunities in Pleasant Plains, Parkview, and LaDroit Park. And we want to we're kind of starting from the bottom, and we want to devise an action plan of policies, programs, and practices to ensure an equitable future for that corridor. So on Saturday from 2 to 4 at Cardoso, we're going to be there. People can just come, stop by, learn about the project, talk to organizations involved, and just kind of see how you can engage in case you're interested. But I have plenty of cards, so in the future, if y'all need to reach out to me about something, just let me know.
Thank you. Any other public announcements? Yeah.
I'm Nick with the Pre-Cook Neighborhood Association. On Saturday, we're doing a neighborhood cleanup. So we live between 16th and 18th, Columbia and U Street. You want to come out and help clean up your neighborhood? Please join us at Unity Park from 9 to 12. Or 9 is a little too early for you. Feel free to come out inside. We'll be out there and we'll send you out to clean up the streets. Hope to see you guys there.
This Saturday?
This Saturday from 9 to 12, Unity Park.
Any other community announcements?
Hi, sorry. Hello everyone, my name is Ruben Foreman and I work with the Mayor's Office of Community Relations and Services. With the Mayor's Office, we are the constituent service arm of the Mayor's Office. Just a couple of notes in regards to making progress we've seen in DC government. This is the 11th consecutive year that we've seen growth in DCPS enrollment, up by 4%. Veteran housing. Mayor Bowser makes the first residential home for veterans in the new redesigned Walter Reed. For those who know, up on 16th Street, Walter Reed was a big naval hospital. Recently, the Navy is no longer there, and the city is working on developing that land. One of the projects which just finished would be a 77 affordable units for veterans who have previously faced homelessness. So it's a great program with wraparound services the mayor has opened up, and it's just one of many affordable housing projects that are coming to the city. I'm not going to talk about the comprehensive plan because I think you've gotten a great announcements about it, and just emphasize again, yes, though it is tonight, you can still attend you can still attend wards 2, 3, 4, or 5, or any of the comp plan meetings. The Office of Planning will have that information on their website, and I also shared a tweet about it. Not promoting my own Twitter though. 2 announcements from DPW. Well, this is actually kind of my announcement. Our office has been working with DPW to try to prevent or get illegal dumpings picked up faster. Something we're noticing is that a lot of these legal dumpings are coming, like basically someone leaves their couch, or an uncovered mattress, or a computer, or a baby carriage. It is everything and anything, and people will leave it outside. Typically, in the District of Columbia, if you're serviced by DPW, we do offer free bulk trash pickups. The thing is, not everyone is in that situation, and a lot of apartments, so they are required to provide a bulk trash service. Some do it at a cost, and some don't make it easy for their neighbors. What happens? Things get put on the sidewalks, and it blocks pedestrian traffic. I usually, in my sweeps, when my sweeps, we go out into the neighborhood and we'll check on physical issues. I will usually try to get as many as I can. Other neighbors can also put legal dumpings on 311 and have the city remove them. We're trying to be a little proactive. If you do see someone dumping something illegally, and especially if they're coming out from an apartment building you know has been an issue in the past, make sure to put that in 311 and make sure you indicate which building or who you've seen doing that legal dumping. The reason why we do this, I'm asking we'll do this, is because if DPW knows which apartment buildings may be doing this a little bit more often, they're able to talk to building management and encourage them not to leave stuff on the side. So I do really encourage that everyone file a 3-1 request when they see a mattress not covered or a couch in the middle of the street. And if you did see someone throw it out, make sure you put that information in there.
For example, like on Unity after 17th Street,
Yeah.
there's this International American Defense, between 17th and this organization, someone has dumped a couch and a chair. And how, if I call 311, they don't ask you all this information, they don't say, well, if you don't have a number, there's nothing we can do about it.
If you don't have a number.
Of the building, but there's no number. There's nothing there because it's sort of a between no man's land where there's nothing there.
Yeah.
There is.
So so my understanding in regards to the 311 request, they're only asking if you did see witness it. We can, if you know, even if you know it keeps coming in front of a certain place, we didn't see anyone put there.
I think she's asking a different question. She's asking a question about a place that does not have an apparent address.
Send that to me. I'm happy to do that. That might be, sometimes the 311 system is based on addresses.
Yes, it is.
It's very confusing. It's very hard to put in certain service requests. Feel free to send that one to me and I'm happy to.
So I can send you a picture?
Yeah, send me a
It's
picture.
sort of a hygiene issue right now.
Yeah,
The
no,
rain
and
the
I can also take a look at it. You said where was it?
We already, we sent it in to DPW.
Got it.
Oh, you saw it?
Thanks to
Okay,
Nick.
you saw it?
Yeah, we sent it to Justin.
All right, wonderful.
Yes,
If you
yeah.
have any issues still getting it removed, let me know. I understand the issue. 311 and Octo is working on a system that will better find addresses, especially when it's not a physical, like an address listed to state government. I know that's something they're working on. It's something we've flagged with them in the past.
But you know what they do in Paris? In Paris, you know.
Benet, could we
All right.
move on, please?
Really quick, we can talk afterwards. Hypothermia alert. The district has activated the hypothermia alert. That is when the temperature goes down by a certain percent. In DC, we have a right to shelter law. Everyone has the right to shelter, especially during hypothermia. If you see someone experiencing homelessness or maybe don't have a place to stay that night, they have access to shelter, and they will pick you up if it is one of the hypothermia alert nights. That number is 202-399-7093, or you can just call 311. Again, 399-7093. If you see pets outside, or, one more time?
Yes.
202-399-7093, or you can call 311. If you see pets, animals outside, on welfare check, you can call the Humane Rescue Alliance at 202-576-6664. In a response, last thing, in response to the president and the current administration pulling out the Paris Climate Agreement, Mayor Bowser has renewed our initiative to make DC 100% clean electricity by 2032 and committed DC becoming carbon neutral by 2050. That's all from me. Anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns?
Nope.
All right,
Thank you.
so much.
Any other public announcements? Yes.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jessica Bruce. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the community liaison at the DC. Just a couple of announcements at the Asbury Community Center. We're going to be having special hours on Saturday. We're going to be opening up at 9 a.m. To assist with our standing cleanup, and also at 10 a.m. with K2P2, our knitting group. We'll be hosting a knit-a-thon. So we're trying to collect about 50 pieces of garments for infants, so using natural fibers to donate actually here at Mary Center. In addition to that, November 23rd, at 10:30, we're hosting our monthly drag queen story hour, which happens every fourth Saturday of the month. And then from 3 to 4 p.m., we have a live studio performance by Uptown Boys in celebration of the Native American Heritage Month. and full service radio in the hotel lobby, free and open to all. In addition, we have special rates for Ward 1 and Friends and Family for the holidays, so please feel free to check that out on the linehotel.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public announcements? Moving then to scheduled business. Oh, no, excuse me. We've got I think it's the People's Council rather than PEPCO, right?
If I come up here, I just speak.
Sure.
Okay, so my name's Anjali Patel. I'm with the Office of the People's Council. We want to thank you, the Commission, for bringing us out here today to talk about a very important case. If those of you who don't know, PEPCO has filed for a rate increase. They routinely file for rate increases. This one's a little bit different. They are asking this time not only to increase rates, but also to change the way their rates are set. So usually, traditionally, the way it works is if PEPCO wants a rate increase, they have to come in, put in an application. OPC advocates on behalf of the district consumers and businesses to say what's right, what's wrong, get a just and reasonable rate for ratepayers, and the commission sets a rate. That's the rate until PEPCO comes back in again. So over the last several rate cases, based on OPC and other stakeholders' advocacy efforts, PEPCO's usually gotten about half of what they've asked for, and actually in the last rate case, they had to decrease rates because of a change in federal tax law. So the rate cases are important. They're an important way to ensure that rates are not too high. What PEPCO's asking for now is to change its plan to 3 successive rate increases. It's called a multi-year rate plan because they want multiple years at once. And they want $160 million over the increase, not just 160 more compared to what they're getting now, over the next 3 years. In the alternative, if they don't get this different plan, they want $80 million under a traditional rate increase scheme. So we've been reviewing the application. We want to make sure that if we move to this new form of rate making, that it will not harm consumers, that we'll get actual benefits. It's not just something that benefits the company. We should, as ratepayers, we should also get benefits. That it advances the district's environmental goals. We just heard about the mayor's push for carbon-free electricity by 2032, 100% renewable by 2032, and carbon-free energy by 2050. They're very aggressive goals. We want to make sure the utility plays a part in that, but plays a part that is cost-effective and provides benefits to all 8 wards in the city, not just 1 ward or 2 wards. So utilities and other jurisdictions have used these multi-year rate plans, but the devil's always in the details, and we want to make sure the details are correct in this plan. So we wanted to raise 3 main issues for your consideration tonight, and we're always happy to answer questions if you have any specific questions about the plan. The first is that these multi-year rate plans are based on, PEPCO is basing its multi-year rate plan on forecasts. So the way that a traditional rate case works, we know their costs, we can review their costs, we vet their costs, and then we set the rate based on what they've already spent. Usually PEPCO, in the past several rate cases, PEPCO has been very poor about forecasting. Their forecasts have been wildly off. Even this time, they filed this alternative, they filed a regular plan, they updated, they filed it in June, they updated in September, and their numbers were off. So it's worrisome. We don't want ratepayers to be paying too much for too high a forecast. So we're looking very closely at their forecasts to make sure that they're getting better, or they shouldn't be basing their rates on forecasts. The second piece is that as part of the plan, they've also asked for something called performance incentive mechanisms, or PIMs. And basically a PIM is a way to get a utility to do something you want them to do. They can be tracking only, they collect data, or they can have a financial incentive associated with them. So PEPCO has proposed multiple PIMs that have financial incentives, which if they meet the metric that's been proposed, they'll get a benefit. So ratepayers will pay more to them for PEPCO achieving this metric. It's always great to get PEPCO's performance, to improve PEPCO's performance. We want to make sure lights stay on. We want to make sure we have reliable service. But we also want to make sure that ratepayers aren't paying again for something that you're already paying for. You pay for safe, reliable, affordable service. PEPCO shouldn't get a benefit for providing what they're supposed to. So, and we also want to make sure if we do have these performance incentives, that they're set appropriately. So if you set them too low, that means it's very easy for the utility to cheat it. And if you set them too high, then it's going to be impossible and you're not actually incenting any performance. So we want to make sure they're right. And then the third kind of main issue is that the district isn't in the stone age of rate making. PEPCO, I don't know if any of you heard PEPCO speak about their plan, but the way they talk about it, it sounds like we're not doing anything here. They're totally behind other utilities. They need this in order to move forward. That's not true. The commission has developed a number of mechanisms over the years to make sure PEPCO gets money that they need. So one of the things that's in place that you'll see a surcharge on your bills for DC undergrounding, for the DC plug initiative, that's to underground the lines. They don't have to wait for the next rate case to get that money. They're getting it right now so that they have cash available to do this infrastructure improvement. There's also a rider called the Bill Stabilization Adjustment you may have seen on your bills, or BSA. That is it's a revenue reconciliation mechanism that PEPCO was authorized to put into effect on bills because they wanted to make sure PEPCO didn't disincentivize investment in energy efficiency. So part of PEPCO's rates are based on how much you use, and if you are investing in energy efficiency, you're using less, the utility is getting less. We wanted to make sure that that wasn't happening. So there's different mechanisms that are already in place. It's not that PEPCO is just dependent on a rate case and oh my gosh, they don't have enough money going forward. So, both of these are significant requests. OPC is reviewing them very carefully, and we want to make sure again that we're only being charged for electric distribution service, not extra services that PEPCO wants to put in place that we don't need, and that the rates stay just and reasonable and as affordable as possible. So we're your attorney. If you have questions, please feel free to contact our office. I can take them now too, and then let us know if you have concerns. We'll be having community hearings in the spring, and everybody's welcome to come and say your piece.
I was curious about timing for this, when you all have to make some sort of decision.
So normally the rate cases take about 12 months, but because this is very complicated, they put it on an 18-month schedule, and our testimony is due in February. Our consultants have been working on this case for a while. That's the schedule right now. Testimony's due in February, our hearing's set for July, and the order may come out September, October. We've asked for a little bit more time because multi-year rate plans are so complicated. It doesn't seem like our commission is quite yet ready to deal with them, so we want the commission to be able to deal with them before we go and review those applications. But I don't know what's going to happen with it.
Yeah.
So for now, it's at least not till the end of next year that we will have an order.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any way that our commission can help affect the outcome? Like, is there a role that ANCs play in passing a resolution saying yay or nay, or is that something you're soliciting, or?
I think that it would be great if your commission wants to get involved. I think it's good to remind the Public Service Commission that these rates have real impacts on ratepayers and that they need to make sure that it's right for both ratepayers and the utility, and that they need to review it very carefully. One of the concerns we have is that because it's so complicated, it may just be easy to say, we'll just try it, see how it goes. But for our office, that's not okay. Everybody has, your income is your income, and you've got lots of different things you need to pay for, and it's not okay to be paying too much for utility services to later on try to figure out if what they did was okay or not. So we want to make sure that the rate is right from the beginning.
Well, as a spin-off from that question, what can we as uneducated ANC commissioners really contribute to the hearing process itself? What is it that we could say that would be helpful?
I think you can bring to light what issues your constituents have in the district. If people have brought bill concerns to you, that's a good thing to bring to the commission. you, to the extent, I believe this ward has a number of low and moderate income families that they're getting a lot of pressure from the energy burden. It's good to remind the commission of that. You're always welcome to file comments with the commission. If you file them, just put them under formal case number 1156 so they go into the docket. You can come speak at the community hearings. They're always willing to listen.
Yeah, I guess what my question is other than loving to hear the sound of our voices, how would we substantively impact the decision-making process? One of the things that I had heard about was this really monumental plan they have for souping up the substations, including one in our neighborhood, that it's my understanding they haven't received the authorization by substantiating the need for this to be built. Now, you know, I'm no expert in whether or not they need this, but I hope someone who is adequately advising whoever it is gets to decide that. But it doesn't feel like there's much I can say that would be helpful to the decision maker, because I don't know enough about the specifics of the topic. But I do think if there is something that comes up that you see as something that we could have an impact on, please get in touch with us. We'd be happy to do whatever we can to support reasonable, rational process. We just don't know enough to be able to sound really intelligent when we respond.
Yeah, thank you. No, we appreciate that. And actually, the capital, you raised is the capital grid case where they're investing more in capital infrastructure. And our office is very involved in the case. But it helps them to hear not just from us. We do the technical part. That's why they created our office, because it's hard for every single person to come in and say, this rate increase is too high. You don't have the time to go into their accounts and figure out they're charging way too much for paper or whatever it is, you know.
Or 8 people to come to a committee meeting of the ANC.
Right. So that's why our office was created, is to give a voice to ratepayers. But it's always good for the commission to be reminded about what the real impact of the bills is. So even if you're not delving into the specifics of the rate case, if you're reminding them what is the impact of that rate, that bill increase on your constituents, that's an important thing for them to hear. But we're happy to talk offline and give you talking points about different issues we can bring up. The environmental issue is big. PEPCO claims that this is going to advance the ball, but then when you read their application, there's nothing in it about modernization. So, you know, there's a lot of framing that doesn't play out when you look into the system.
So when would we need to have our comments in?
It's open until next year, so there's
Okay.
plenty of time.
So maybe we could set something up for you to come in and talk to a committee?
That would be great.
Great.
We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I think we should do that in January. That way they have testimony in February and you could use us for supplemental material, I assume.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah.
And I'll give you my card before.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
My question is also about the capital grid project. Is there any connection between the rate increases and financing the capital grid project?
So the capital grid project is in 2 phases. One is the substation at Mount Vernon, and then there's other associated, they're running a line from Tacoma to Harvard, and then there's one more line. So
Here,
Yeah, Champlain.
Champlain, thank you. So the traditional rate case, that 80 million rate case, 85 million, does not have parts of capital grid in it, I believe, because the way we are not supposed to pay for infrastructure until it becomes used and useful, which means it's completed, done, and online. So the old rate case, the sort of regular rate case, has costs that are of facilities that are already online. The multi-year rate plan, though, does have some of those facilities that come online before it's complete. The substation, though, is not, I have been told it's not in there yet because it hasn't been approved and it's further out, the timing is further out for the building of that.
And follow-up, is it still the position of your office that the capital grid project may not actually be necessary due to efficiencies in like homeowners appliances and other such?
Yeah, that is still our position. So we fought both phases. The first phase ended up getting approved. The second phase with the substation is still out there. Our position is that you need to look at other solutions now. You can't just Pepco shouldn't just be replacing infrastructure or building new infrastructure. We've got distributed energy, we have storage, we've got energy efficiency gains, demand response. There's lots of different ways we can address and potential capital infrastructure need that we believe Pepco is not doing a fulsome job about addressing those needs. So that has been our argument to the commission. See what happens.
Is it at this stage where you've made your argument and it's a question of the decision just coming independently, or is it going to come as part of these two $80 and $160 million increases?
Right, so the substation is a separate case. Once it's approved, it would still be part of a rate case, just not this one yet. But we have made our arguments. It's unclear whether the commission's actually considering right now whether they're going to have more process on the substation, whether they're going to take more testimony in the hearing, or they're just going to decide based on what's in the record. So that's kind of up under discussion right now. But we have already put in testimony saying we don't believe it's necessary at this time and they need to do better studies. And this goes back to their poor forecasting. When you look at what they expect the load to be, Pepco has been consistently much higher than what the load actually is. And if you over forecast load, that means you're over forecasting what infrastructure you need. Why should we be paying for stuff that doesn't need to be used or won't ever be used? Go ahead.
One comment, one question. The comment is, yesterday, coincidentally, I did something that I almost never do, which is answer my landline reference. The reason why is because it looked like an actual real phone number as opposed to saying spam. And it turned out to be a survey. And as I got into it, it became evident that it's a survey being conducted by a company that is hired by Pepco. The very first question was, are you a Pepco customer? Which, you know, could have meant anything. But as we got deeper and deeper into the questions, it became more and more evident that whoever is doing the survey is doing it for Pepco. And they started getting deeper and deeper into questions that obviously relate to this case that you're talking about. For starters, the survey is incredibly long, to the point where I was looking at my watch and saying, you know, I'm sorry, I can't keep going here. I gotta get off the phone because I had something else to do. And the person taking the survey was very upset with me because she'd been on the phone with me for like 20 minutes already. Like everything she had been doing was going to be invalid. She'd wasted 20 minutes. But it became evident to me as the survey was going on that some of these questions that they're asking are, as you would expect, tilted and biased in such a way that there is no way. I mean, I'm a reasonably educated person, and I've worked a little bit in the utility field. There is no way that the average person answering the phone could possibly understand some of the stuff that's being said with this, or some of the questions that are being asked, or some of the statements that are being made. And so to the extent that they are using the results of the survey as part of their evidence in this rate case, I would just urge you to rip it to shreds. Because
thank you, that's helpful to know.
There's no way that the results that they're getting from the average person answering the phone could possibly be informed answers. Because the stuff that's being spewed out by the person asking the question is just, it's complicated and gobbledygook. The question is, in the Exelon merger, you know, this was supposed to be the grand solution to so many problems. Was there anything, is there anything in the Exelon merger that the PSC was supposed to be giving us that is the answer to what it is they're asking for here?
So the Exelon merger did have quite a few consumer benefits in it. One was that there was a consumer base rate credit that went into effect after the merger, and that's supposed to continue through March 2021. So although Pepco has had 2 rate cases since the merger closed, consumers have been protected from those rate increases / decrease, and your rates have been steady through the whole time. They also provided money for a grid modernization initiative that is, the pilot projects will start going out in the next year, requests for proposals. So there's ties to it, and this is partly why the office says with the substations, we're not ready for it because you have to look at these other things. We're looking forward into the future, we want to make sure we're putting the right solutions in. And some of the merger was intended towards developing these right solutions, but it's not clear from the rate case, every application they filed that they're necessarily incorporating those issues here. You say one thing here, say a different thing here. Unfortunately, ratepayers have to pay for both sides.
Another problem that this commission and neighborhood has had to endure is Pepco seeking the permissions for something that they're not even cleared to have permission to do yet. In other words, the Champlain Street substation. We've had to listen to their people come and talk all about what they would do in the historic preservation element of it and the zoning element and everything like that, and it may not even happen, you know, and it just seems like they're got the cart way before the horse, and they must be spending money. And is it money that comes from our rates?
Yeah, generally, most of that stuff does come from your rates.
How about that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for having us.
Thank you. And you've got a card that you're going to leave with Jacob?
Let me grab it.
Okay, moving on to scheduled business, ABC and public safety. We are in the situation where we've got a bunch of tavern licenses that have come up for renewal, including Heaven and Hell, Green Island Cafe, Tamari, Madam's Oregon, Buckham Cafe, Shenanigans, Mellow Mushroom, Bedrock Billiards, Grand Duchess, Green Zone, The Imperial, Songbird, We Work, Roofers Union, and Town Tavern. We expressly asked the nighttime police folks about Heaven and Hell, which we protested the last time around because the police were telling us that it was the source of most of the problems that they were encountering on 18th Street. As a result of that, they were required to have RCD coverage, which they failed to do and failed to pay for repeatedly, and have wound up with, I can't remember, $60,000 fine? $90,000 fine, plus a 3-month suspension beginning in November. Which may well be the end of that particular establishment. But I have had a businessman in the community who's approached me about protesting the renewal of the license for Heaven and Hell on the basis that they're a continuing problem. And it seems to me, based on what the police have told us and what I have seen personally, that it is substantially improved from what it was, even though it might not be what we would wish for the neighborhood. I don't personally feel that it is appropriate for the ANC to make a protest unless we have something substantial that we believe we can get out of it. And at this point, I don't think we do on Heaven and Hell. But I would like to hear from commissioners and from those in the public if you have particular licensees that you're concerned about in that list. We have to protest tonight, if at all, any of those licenses. So I would open up the floor to ask if there are any people who have particular concerns about any particular licensee.
There's a couple of businesses missing from that list that are also tavern licenses.
Yes, because they don't send them all out at the same, they send a bunch of them out, but I got a few more of them this week.
Yeah.
So they're not up until we can decide those in December.
Oh, okay.
And that's why we just do it as the notices come in.
Okay, yeah, because I noticed that it wasn't a complete list.
Right.
I would just like to see if there's anyone that is here that is a business owner or representative from the businesses and see if they want to talk about their experience or they need.
Who are you with?
I'm Joe Lappin. I'm one of the co-owners of Songbird Music.
Oh, okay.
How you doing?
Good. I may have met you before, but I didn't recognize her.
No, I have nothing to say. I just am here, always doing something comes up pertaining to my establishment.
And it looks like, I mean, I don't have any.
The only one that I have concerns about is that Bookham Cafe has made a request to terminate their settlement agreement. And I think it's important that we protest that request rather than the renewal of their license, because I think it's important that the businesses along 18th, because we have so many of them, that they have settlement agreements with the ANC and the community organizations, KCA or CNA, in order to sort of level the playing field and make sure that we have lots of folks who are good examples when we have a bad example, that we have to point out to them how they need to be behaving rather than how they are behaving. And it does not make sense to me, even though Bookham has been a good operator all along. We haven't had any problems with them. We modified their agreement just a few years back in order to allow them to have a cover charge. They have live music on a regular basis. They also have food on a regular basis. They do a very good job of mixing the two. But it does not seem to me that we should eliminate the settlement agreement. And I will be making a motion on that shortly. But I wanted to hear from the community if there were any other licensees that were a particular concern to the community. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, obviously, I'm not the one that has to go down to the ABC board to spend my day or my...
We could deputize you.
I haven't done it in a long time, so, I defer to your and other commissioners' judgment, but I was struck by the article that I read about the proceeding at the ABC board that Heaven and Hell's sanction was levied at. Where the chairman of the ABC board, so far as I know, so far as I follow these things, is not known to be particularly harsh with licensees. Told the owner of Heaven and Hell, when we first came down here, I had a hard time pronouncing your name. This time, I know your name all too well. Before he leveled this $90,000 fine and 3-month suspension. It's been 13 years since the last time I sat in your place. It's been 18 years since I first sat on this commission. This guy has been in trouble with this commission in one way or another for all that time. And probably before that, I don't know.
And yet, surprisingly, he can run Columbia Station, which has been no problem.
Right. At a certain point, like, when is enough enough? If he can't pay the $90,000 fine and, goes out of business, maybe, but maybe he raises the money some other way. Maybe he sells it. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he comes up with the money and he somehow stays in business and continues to operate it the way he's operated it, all this stuff. But maybe if the commission protests this time, the chairman of the ABC board will say, okay, you're out of business.
The challenge when you protest is that if you're going to go to a hearing, sometimes we protest in order to maintain a seat at the table to do a settlement agreement. He's got, as effective a settlement agreement as we can put in, we've got. The problem is not the lack of settlement agreement here. The problem is the way he operates the place. The problem is that we need to have people to testify. And the last go-around, we had police officers who gave tremendous testimony that led to the imposition of the security measures that resulted in this fine. This time around, we don't have those police officers testify. They've been reassigned elsewhere. And the new police officers do not have the same strong feelings that the prior officers did. So with the absence of testimony, simply telling the board, we're tired of dealing with this guy after 20-some years, to me doesn't feel like it's very effective use of our time, because I don't think that they pull licenses if they have several dead bodies. That's about the only time they pull a license. And all we have is the toxic cocktail that supposedly was a mistake. So I don't think we have the ammunition to be able to do it. And frankly, of all of the establishments, it would be one of the most challenging to deal with, just on a dealing with the people involved. So that adds to my reluctance. I do understand that there is a neighborhood group that is going to be protesting.
Yeah. Well, I also understand that the gentleman who was served that cocktail was planning to sue the establishment.
Exactly.
But in the end, it'll probably be the insurance company who pays and not the owner of the establishment.
Depends on what the proof is, but that's outside our purview. But as I say, there is a neighborhood group, two neighborhood groups, supposedly some people who are living in a building nearby, and some sort of business group that I wasn't familiar with that have protested or are protesting.
They're not qualified.
I'm just stating out who is supposedly protesting, but I would be disinclined to protest that. There's one other one that wasn't mentioned, assets, which I believe you had an encounter this afternoon with. Assets is the new, very clever name for the exotic dancer bar that's on the corner of Florida and Connecticut that had been...
Royal Palace.
Yes.
Maybe the Royal Palace.
The Royal Palace. And so far as I understand, there's not going to be any change in their operation at all, except that there's been a change in ownership. It's been there as long as I've been in the neighborhood, like 20 years.
27 years.
I've never seen any problems arising from it, other than, a person disinclination to go into that establishment.
I went in today.
Yes.
And I mean, it was actually very clean, tidy, orderly. It looked like a restaurant inside. I mean, I would eat there. There's also a shower behind the bar.
There was shower?
It's my understanding that the 2B ANC wanted us to join in on it, and that we're technically allowed to because it's directly across the street from our southernmost border. But I really don't understand the basis for a protest there. They have in place a settlement agreement. Not only do we not have any residents who are immediately adjacent to it, but neither of the other ANCs do either. There's nothing around there that's residential until you get at least a block away. So if you're going to have those things, I'd prefer to have them where people can walk to them rather than drive to them and then drive home drunk. So it just seems to me that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to protest that.
What was the name of it again?
Assets.
Thank you.
And I have the voluntary agreement as well as their security plan, which is pretty dense. If anyone is interested in seeing it, and I've given it to commissioners via email. But yeah, I concur. I don't think that we should add to the settlement agreement. It just seems like out of our scope, and they also seemed like pretty good business partners. So
we'll be adding them as one of the Porch Fest people.
They don't have a big enough porch.
I would, having heard no other licensees who should be protested in this particular go-round, I would move that we protest the petition to terminate settlement agreement with Bookham Cafe, licensee is Marabou Inc. and that we protest on the basis of adverse impact on peace, order, and quiet in the neighborhood, and that any ANC commissioner would be authorized to appear on behalf of ANC 1C at any of the proceedings involved with this petition. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, questions, concerns?
Hey,
Yeah.
sorry, real quick.
Yeah, it's Bookham Cafe, but that's their trade name. Their license name is Marabu, M-A-R-A-B-U, Inc.
I didn't intend to speak, and I actually have to leave, which is why the only reason I just want to take this opportunity very quickly, because I saw something future on your agenda, and I have to go.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to comment with respect to just anecdotally from one licensee. I've probably been visited by these different agencies in at least the last couple of weeks. I didn't know this was on your agenda. I just wanted to anecdotally share that with you and say,
Have you been visited by them in evening hours?
that's a good question.
That's one of the-
If that's what this is about, then
That's one of the challenges, is that it's a situation where particularly Department of Health won't come out.
And DPW.
And DPW won't come out during the hours that are really the main hours of operation.
Okay.
And we've had problems with Department of Health coming out to enforce the smoking ban, for example.
Right.
And back in the day, ABRA didn't used to have nighttime inspectors. Their inspectors came during the day when no one was there, which you can imagine was not a very representative way of dealing with it. But
I apologize for switching. I
yep, not a problem.
I saw that on your thing.
We appreciate you being here and appreciate your input.
And feel free to email us with any comments you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same for everybody always.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the protest? Move to a vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. And
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
You and I both received an email from the owner and Amir as well.
right,
This is actually, he did actually apply to.
yes, yeah,
Just was curious if he followed through.
yep.
Thank you.
Moving then to Planning, Zoning, Transportation Committee, BZA application for Destination Pet.
Good evening, I have some materials to pass around here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is just a copy of the application materials that we submitted before the BZA. Thank you, commissioners, for allowing us to present tonight. My name is Stephen Varga, I'm an urban planner with Cozen O'Connor. I am joined tonight by Rob Border of Destination Pet. In addition, Nicole Ute as well, and Elizabeth Roth, to introduce the case. Destination Pet is in operation on 18th Street across from Marie Reed. As many of you know, operating as Life of Riley. They have submitted a BZA application to expand the animal use to the building to the south as a veterinary hospital. We presented the case before the PZT last month, at which time we obtained a vote of support. And you all, the PZT asked us to do some additional research into waste storage, which we'll share with you momentarily. I reviewed the record in the BZA case today, and the record appears to be clean. We've talked to the Office of Planning as well. I spoke to the case reviewer directly, and they haven't released their report for the case yet, but he didn't share with me any concerns that he had at this time about recommending support to the board.
They generally want to hear and make sure that we don't have any objections that they can respond to.
That's well noted. Life of Riley has been working with the community, and to that point, I'd just like to turn it over to some of the folks at Destination Pet and Life of Riley to discuss their coordination with Adams Morgan Bid And then obviously we'll field any questions that you have about the project.
Before you leave the stage, could you just let us know what the relief is being sought?
Sure. So it's zoned, the property is zoned MU4, and in the MU4 zone, that corroborates with use group E, which encompasses animal uses of all kinds. That includes animal boarding, which is the current use of the Life Riley space in 2222 through 2224 18th Street. And they're proposing to expand into the neighboring building, same zoning. They're proposing that relief is going to be for veterinary office / hospital in that area.
So that's not otherwise allowed in MU4?
Correct. So it's not allowed as a matter of right, but by way of special exception. And that's associated with certain conditions that need to be met. And we feel that those conditions have been met in this case. And I'm more than happy to go into the specifics on that if the commissioners wish. But in any event, they're expanding into that building.
Yeah, the thing that I was primarily concerned about, and as I looked through the thing, it says animal waste shall be placed in closed waste disposal containers located in enclosed areas or away from abutting or confronting residential windows and doors, and should be collected by a waste disposal company at least weekly. I can't imagine that you can get away with once a week with animal waste. I really can't. I would strongly encourage you to practice differently, but.
And those are some of the comments that we received last month at the meeting as well. And that additionally, to that point, Robin, obviously he can speak more to the specifics, but he's done some research into some rat-proof containers. That was a big consideration at the last meeting, in addition to exploring other ways to deal with frankly, with the rat issue that we have on 18th Street. So, to that point, if you'd like to, Robin.
Did you have something to add too, or?
My name is Deborah, and I live on Colorama, 2 buildings down from all of the businesses on 18th. And we're already having significant issues with waste disposal and management in what we term Rat Alley.
Yeah.
That's our neighborhood, Rat Alley. And we just really want to make sure, because we've heard from the businesses there's not enough space to have outdoor storage, they're limited, they have problems with waste collectors, and 100 other reasons why their waste isn't being picked up. So we just got this in the mail 2 days ago, so we haven't had a chance to look through the proposal and things like that. So any information that you can share, we'd love to hear about it. And maybe about the cooling system, the HVAC system, if there's going to be any additional implements on the roof or changes in the landscape in that area, and noise prevention and things like that.
Sure. Again, my name is Rob Border. I'm from Destination Pet. I'm the construction manager. I oversee the design, the build, the soundproofing, the whole 9 yards from start to finish, from the shovel until I open the door. At last meeting, we were approached about the waste. All right, so we're going to start with the waste. It was recommended, by the board last time, maybe a compactor. Let's talk about a compactor. Problem with the compactor is you squish it, and it's like a balloon. You squish it, it breaks, and stuff goes everywhere, whatever. So we really can't go towards a compactor for that reason, because it's going to make a bigger mess than just throwing it in the trash, per se. So what it came up with, I was looking into a lot of different options. If you're familiar with parks, campgrounds, stuff like that, they have beer containers. Beer trash cans where they're all matched, and you can lock them out, you can do whatever. There's many different styles of it. I do have a couple of ideas that are here. Just not saying I'm using this one, but they're all exactly the same. No matter what company it is, it's exactly the same in every company. So I can show you that. We do use Waste Management for trash removal, and I've been on the phone with Waste Management, and they do not have any bear-proof, animal-proof, anything like that. So I did ask the next question: can you pick up one once a week? Of course, they said, yeah. Money they'll do anything, right? So you know, we are looking into, gonna try to do it twice a week instead of once a week. There's a couple other options here I found was that there's straps for the waste management containers, you know, the big plastic ones. They have straps that we could put on so they're animal proof. I'm not gonna say I like that idea. I like the metal containers, to be honest with you. It's costing me more money. It's costing me about $1,200 for one container. It's about $1,800 for a double container if we need a bigger one. We're gonna start with one and see if that works. If it doesn't, we're gonna go into the double one or buy a second single container, which is a 40-gallon container. Okay? Questions on that? Anything? Yes, sir.
Why can't the solid waste just be flushed?
It all comes back down to the government. It does the city. There's some locations that we have. Destination Pet is across, we're nationwide. We're across the country. And there's some areas where we do use toilets or flush receptacles. But then other areas, they say absolutely not. Can't mix the animals with humans. I don't understand it why, but I'll be honest with you, I never looked into it. I would be more than happy to look into it with the city here and see what they say about it. If that's the case, we have toilets, right? So we need to look, I'll look into that one. I didn't do it because I was just going with what the board said last time.
To me,
I
can't imagine, I mean,
there must be something different in our poop and their poop. That's all I can say. So, you know, I will definitely look into it, but, you know.
So while we're on this particular topic, when your employees take, say, dogs out for a walk, and they urinate or poop, you know, and it gets picked up, hopefully.
Yeah.
What happens to that? Does that get put in a regular trash can, or is that brought back to the business?
Yes, on both of those. Not a regular trash can, but if there's a waste station, a pet waste station, they have bags on them. You've seen them at some parks and stuff like that. Dog parks have them. Just so you know, also that
I guess what I'm trying to, like, if one of your employees is walking a dog, say, along 18th Street, then up Wyoming, and around back down Calorama, and it takes a poop, does that get put in a public trash can, like on the sidewalk?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't go into the public trash can unless it's a pet waste station.
Wait, what are those?
Well, there's a lot of dog parks and a lot of other areas that have literally
in front of Tesco's, there's a pet waste station.
Yeah, do they have bags there for the animals, and they have a transport? It's on a post or it's freestanding, and then a company comes and picks it up and restocks the bags and everything else. If there is no pet waste station, it does get carried back to our center and gets thrown away.
Yeah, well, it kind of raises the question of like, okay, the pet waste station is set up for the residents, but then here comes a commercial entity. You know,
Well, frankly, I don't think we have any pet waste stations in Adams Morgan.
The tennis court,
Aren't they sponsored by the
There's trash bags.
So there's a big thing for it.
We have 3 right now that we installed. One we installed near the Adams Morgan Animal Hospital in partnership with them, which is right across the street from them in front of the tennis courts. We service those cans. We put new bags, new doggy bags, and also empty the waste that gets put in there every day. So
what happens to that waste?
It gets taken to Fort Totten with the rest of the trash. So again.
DC government won't pick it up. It's part of the contract that they won't do it.
Yeah, we service it.
Yeah.
So it gets taken to Fort Totten with the rest of the trash that we take out of the municipal cans every day. But Destination Pet Life and Riley are ordering 2 additional pet waste stations that we're going to install and we will service every day.
And these are ones that are rat-proof, or more rat-proof than the usual?
Well, they're up above the ground.
And they're solid?
They're metal,
Yeah.
green metal. They have a lid on them, and they're raised, you know. Up above the ground.
Right.
It's as rat-proof as you can get. Rats are super smart. The bear thing, like I would say, rats are smarter than bears. So I would say thanks for looking for a solution. I don't necessarily think the water, like pumping into our sewage thing is gonna work, but I would definitely implore you to look up more options to make sure rats can't get into the poo. But thank you for,
Like you say, the bear-proof containers, they're animal-proof. Some places call them bear-proof because, you know, they're animal-proof. They're raccoon-proof, because raccoons are as smart as rats. All right? So, out in nature.
Yeah, exactly.
There's actually handles where you have to open it, you know, and, you know, and close it. It's a spring lever thing where you make sure it's closed. You use a handle to open it. And again, I have a copy. I can show you what I'm talking about. That's not a problem. Okay?
I did see on page 9 is where it discusses the waste.
Right. I
Can
think
I
that
just
was what I was
ask
going to.
what these addresses are?
Yeah, so that's the part of the requirement for BZA applications, is you have to notify all property owners within 200 feet of the property.
So you're listed on this?
So
1810.
1806.
1810 Meredith Living.
I'm Deborah Zanovich.
Ah, I see you. Yep, Deborah.
Okay.
It does make sense that you would have just received that, possibly.
Am
Yeah,
I
so
right?
part of the, so the DC offices,
1819?
they take the list and they're the ones who deliver those.
It just might be helpful for some of the residents, maybe if you guys in person.
I can't tell.
Okay.
We can be a little bit more organized getting back.
Yeah, and I'm more than happy, I'll give you my contact information.
Yeah.
And then if you have specific follow-up questions after this, yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
The ANC thing may be your first rodeo in Washington, but this is obviously not the first facility built. So when we're talking about waste here, we're not just talking about poop, right? We're talking about a veterinary hospital. You might be talking about organs.
No, that gets picked up by another facility. We don't throw organs, we don't throw that stuff in the trash. It'll be picked up. And I don't know offhand because I'm not in the operations side of it. I build them, but I don't know exactly what it is, but organs and stuff do not put in the trash. That I do know. And those get picked up separately by another agency.
So it would be like medical waste at a hospital?
Yes, very simply.
So, I'm sorry, Ted?
It would be like medical waste at a hospital that gets
It is
processed
medical
separately
waste.
from the...
Separately, on a daily basis?
If there's stuff to be picked up, yes, it will be. Yeah.
So we're really only talking about
dog poop.
Excrement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So PC.
There's at least one. There's at least one other. Isn't there at least one other veterinary clinic?
There's 2 others.
There's 2 others.
So
there's one in the same zone.
Adams Morgan Animal
So do we know
And
what their,
Banfield.
do we know what their practice is? What their waste disposal practices are?
They have not come to us for any permissions since I've been on the commission, so no.
Do we know what they
No.
do? I mean, do we know whether there have been complaints?
Have not heard any.
I mean, it seems to me that if there's a standard of practice that they follow and that they haven't, that there haven't been any complaints about them, that is a template that we should ask these folks to follow. And clearly that there is a practice in place that is working and that they should live up to the same standard of practice.
And we will. I don't know, we don't know what, I don't personally know what it is. You're right. Nobody else.
In the absence of you knowing what it is, you're not committing to it. In the absence of them knowing what it is.
I'll commit to it because we will take care of it. I'm sorry to say it that way. We're not looking and saying you're crazy for doing it, but we will stand up to whatever we have to do.
But the problem that I have at the moment is you're asking for the commission to endorse your application for special exception. And what the special exception rules provide is that the commission should only, well, let's put it this way, that it shouldn't have any adverse effect on neighboring properties. And that the commission has the authority to impose any conditions on the special exception that it deems appropriate.
Correct.
And
So there's the zoning requirements that are associated with the special exception that speak to the impacts to the community. In addition to that, of course, there are licensing requirements in order to obtain the CFO to operate the facility as well. I would expect that many of those requirements are in that arena, rather than the zoning.
Let's not depend on DCRA and CFO people to do any of that. We're talking here about what the BZA is going to impose as a condition, that whatever the ANC does is what you're asking. You're asking the ANC to endorse your application. And what I'm suggesting to the ANC is that it be subject to that any approval of the special exception be subject to the imposition of conditions related to waste that are equivalent to the practices of the other veterinary hospital, waste disposal practices equivalent to the other veterinary hospitals operating in Adams County.
The only problem with that is how does BZA know what those practices are?
I guess we'd have to find out.
And also, I don't know if the animal hospitals down the street are even comparative to this, because they're asking, this is gonna be like a kennel area.
Right, they might not have the same
So
quantity.
I don't think they would have the same like capacity.
Yeah.
They may have a week or every 2 weeks, whereas you'll be boarding more animals, I think the week. It sounds like you're doing a good effort with what's going on and you're listening to get feedback. I would kind of like to echo what Alan has to say about following through on a proper waste recycle receptacle, if we could get that in some type of,
Yeah, could we not make that a condition of any resolution and support, so, we support as long as, some sort of heavy duty receptacle and, more than once a week garbage pickup. BZA is gonna do what BZA is gonna do, but if we put that in a
The other piece is that BZA is not an effective enforcement mechanism. So that anything that gets put in that order, once they get their stamp so they can operate, basically BZA stands away from it, is my understanding.
Yeah, but the CFO will be subject, eventually the CFO will be dependent upon what the BZA.
But that would just be once they get the new, like a new license renewal, or go through that process again?
I don't think they'd have relicensing that would come before the ANC. Did you have a suggestion, Dennis?
Yeah. This, just in case some of the commissioners don't know, this is located, the rear of these properties are located 6 feet away from the first residential building, the roadhouse, which is condominiums, I believe. So, there's already a problem there with some of the other establishments, a problem which has been grinding along without resolution. And I'm not going to name names at this moment, but there's a couple that won't clean up their act. So this will be adding a whole lot more. What I'd like to, the reason I wanted to make sure everybody knew how close it was. Like, wouldn't we all just love to have that
It's
6
3
feet
feet.
from our property? Pardon?
I think it's 3 feet.
Well, in some cases they build back. The buildings have been built back like with a little cubby hole on the back. Anyway.
Okay.
You can barely get a dumpster through, a little dumpster.
A little dumpster.
So, is the part that you're taking over, is that going to be strictly the animal hospital, or will that also be more boarding?
That'll be some more boarding.
And hospital?
Boarding and hospital.
Is it going to be
and some
easily
daycare.
defined, like second floor boarding, first floor hospital?
Second floor boarding, first floor will be that.
Okay. But the existing one stays the same?
Stays the same.
Okay. So, there'll be an increase in the amount of waste created?
There will be if we are full, yes. And to answer his question or make a comment on what you just said, you're right that 6 foot is behind the existing Life O'Reilly. The facility we're taking over is actually the parking lot, so it's not moving the other way.
Parking lot?
Yeah, there's like there is for the residents there. There's some parking spaces right behind it.
We're not taking over a parking lot?
No. I'm just saying that it's not that close to the.
It's adjacent to.
Yeah,
It's behind the structure. Yeah.
Because we're taking over, I don't know if you're familiar, I don't even know the name of it.
I live
right around the restaurant there, the orange restaurant.
We are.
Whatever the color, that's what we're taking over. It's the bar restaurant.
Okay, let's try and keep this orderly, okay? I believe Benet was next.
If you need more information about how the waste of the feces, on 14th and W, there is a dog boarding company that was opened a few years ago. And that's, I mean, they have like hundreds of dogs a day. And that's a way, if you want to have more information, is you can ask how it was. I mean, I remember they went through quite a major ordeal, to get their license, because people were protesting and everything. And that's it's one of those new condos, and it's a big boarding for dogs. So that's also a way, for our community to know how to dispose of the feces. And the second is just for clarification, because I think is this going to be also a veterinarian clinic?
Yeah, but it's eventually will be a
hospital. The hospital, okay, I just wanted to.
But it's just for dogs?
Yes.
Oh, just for dogs, okay. All right, now I got it, okay. And a kennel, honestly.
Dogs and a cat,
Oh.
The domestic things, So there'll be some cats that probably also, we don't board cats or do anything like that, but if they come in to get spayed, neutered, whatever, then we won't turn away a cat for doing that.
Oh, okay.
Eric?
I just, two observations or comments. I mean, one is the pet hospital just opened up at Banfield House Pile at 1700 Columbia Road within the last 6 months. So I'm surprised that all these waste issues haven't been considered before. Because
There was a situation where they had inside the building trash as opposed to out in the alleys.
Okay. That's one observation. The other observation is there is a restaurant, my impression, I haven't seen the plans, but there's a restaurant ABC establishment that is not going to be there, right?
Right.
So when we talk about there's going to be more waste, is it true that there's going to be net more waste? I mean, there's a restaurant that is with all of the food waste and so on. It's not clear to me that this
I think you're correct.
is going to have more waste than already.
I think you're correct. That it will be a diminution in the total amount, but, there will be substantially more animal excrement than there
There will
have
be
been.
more animal excrement,
Right.
but less food waste.
Right.
And
Yep.
so.
Yeah, like the issue about the bins not fitting in the alley, I mean, it would be the same, it would just be different bins if that were the case, because it would be the same amount of waste, just different.
I don't think the issue is the quantity. I think the issue, I mean, I don't know how often the restaurant gets its waste picked up. I think the issue for the people who live there is that there is a large quantity of animal excrement only being picked up once a week.
Well, is the food only being picked up once a week?
And I doubt it.
I live up the alley from Adams Morgan Animal Hospital, and I don't see any problems from there.
Well,
maybe they're fantastic on the
No, that was my point. We're in agreement on this.
Yes.
But the idea is.
Well, I just feel that we should be, my impression of Adams Morgan is that I feel delighted that there's a new business coming in that's not an alcoholic establishment.
Then why do we have to have the division?
And I would say, thank God for opening up more non-alcohol establishments.
Facilities do.
But at the same time, I wouldn't want to live next door to a pile of dog shit piled up for a week while rats are running around eating.
So can we go back to the model of addressing the commission rather than each other? Thank you. It's not clear to me, given the structure of BZA and what I know to be their lack of enforcement mechanism and the unwillingness of DCRA to look at things once they're already open, I have a difficult time seeing that any provision that we put in a resolution about this would have any more impact than their heart-sworn testimony that they will take care of this problem, they understand what our concerns are, and they will be good neighbors. Part of which is that I would assume that many of your clients will be very nearby and will no longer patronize you if you make their life unpleasant. So it would be my inclination to tell the BZA that we approve the request for exemption for use without having any qualifiers on it at this point. Because I just think that's one of those things that...
Who's going to come and enforce it?
Yeah, nobody's going to come and enforce it, and unfortunately, since it's in my SMD, if you fail to do things well, I will be down there just making your life less pleasurable than it otherwise would be, so...
And I brought the manager and the area manager here, so they just heard it from you.
Yeah, so, you know, the really crucial thing here is to make sure that you do your absolute best efforts to mitigate the impact, particularly in that building that had historically been, hopefully with the 3 renovations that have happened now, or 4 renovations, a lot of the rats have been gotten out of the building, but they used to caper on the roof at the evenings and enjoy the dance music that was coming out from downstairs. So anything that you can do from a practical matter to make life better for your neighbors would be most appreciated.
Let the cats out, chase their rats.
I cannot believe what I'm hearing. You know, I think this is incredible. They want something from the neighborhood. They want a free pass. And there's a mechanism in place by which this commission can tell the BZA what they think needs to happen. And you're going to pass on it?
And what is it?
I'm closer to that than you do.
And what is it exactly and expressly that you would request the BZA to require of them that is enforceable and actually
What
will
has the
happen?
discussion been? It's been take good care of the shit, okay? I don't care if you flush it. I don't care what kind of can you put it in. I don't want to know it's there. And you have to construct something that says that. That's not that hard. I don't want to do it right now, but I could go home and write you a few paragraphs.
Yeah, I mean, I see no harm in putting something in writing that at least expresses our concerns, and whether or not BZA is going to enforce them or send someone to enforce them. I mean, they do include conditions all the time in their orders, but also, I mean, you know, they could include something saying that this comes back before us in 2 years, and if there's problems with it, you know, we review the special exception again, which is what they've done in prior cases. I mean, I want, you know, I'm in support of what you guys are doing. I think it's great. Eric's point, I think it's great. It's not another liquor establishment. I don't think the trash situation is gonna, you know, be significantly more in terms of volume than what it is. But obviously there's a problem in that area. You know, I don't think you guys should be punished for a problem that other people are creating as well, but...
It's not punishment. It's part of the process.
No, I know, but I'm saying I don't want to
Could we
this burden on them simply because they're asking for a special exception, whereas other businesses that had to, you know, have an opportunity to handle things however they want to handle them, and it's not something we have a say in, but I mean, seeing that there is an opportunity here to weigh in, I see no reason not to just express our concerns. BZA can do with them what they will.
I do have a question for you. When are you scheduled on the BZA docket?
I believe it's December 18th. It's the last hearing of the calendar year. I believe it's
Would you be inclined to be able to write up a proposed restriction that we could consider at the December meeting and send off to them in time for the hearing?
Sure, absolutely.
And it's one that, do you have contact for him so he'll know what the language is that you're proposing? Could you get his contact? Because I don't want to have you guys have to trot back to another meeting.
And sit through 2 hours.
And
December 18th.
the idea of getting some language that expresses our concern, but still generally approves it, is the concept that we would be going forward with, and put it on the agenda for the December meeting. And Amanda will have some language that she'll circulate before that time that we can take a look at and consider. Does that make sense? In which case, do I have a motion to table this matter until the December meeting?
Second.
Do I have a motion? I don't want to make my own motion.
I will move to table
Okay.
this till the December meeting.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the time that you've taken to come twice to our meetings and discuss this problem. But it is a real concern of the neighbors, and I'm not sure exactly what the solution is, but perhaps consulting with the animal hospital that isn't immediately adjacent would get you some good ideas.
I also think just a selection of your trash receptacle, like a final solution, would probably just make the case.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
It's not a problem. Like I said, I got some, stuff here to show you. So.
Yeah, I would say just pick one that makes the most sense with community members involved, and I'm down.
Great.
Yes.
So, could we have a vote on the motion to table to the December meeting? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes. So we won't see you next week, but we'll shoot you something that gives you an idea, and you can come and tell us you don't like the language if you don't like the language.
All right.
Make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see the number on this. Excuse me? I don't see the number, the BZA number on this.
Oh, it's 20166.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving then to,
Did you want to run a copy of this by any chance on the trash cans? That one has a picture on it there. There's just different versions, like I said, different manufacturers and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but this one shows, if you open this up, it actually shows a little bit more defined on how they are and stuff like that. So,
that looks better than the normal receptacle, certainly.
yeah. Yeah, and they got a double one also if we needed more.
Yeah.
So, you can get that one too if you like it.
We would hope that you would not need the double one.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving then to resolution support of pedestrian and cyclist safety bills.
Cool.
Folks, if you're going to chat, please keep moving. Resolution support of pedestrian and cyclist safety bills.
Yes, I can speak on this.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a resolution in support of numerous pedestrian, cyclist, Vision Zero safety bills that numerous council members proposed. There was a committee hearing last week, and we are hoping to submit a resolution in support of all of those measures to hope that they pass out of committee and then pass as committee whole and then get enacted and signed by the mayor. A brief little snippet about each bill that we're endorsing or would hope to endorse. We have 242, which is known as the Bicycle Advisory Council Expansion Amendment Act. This essentially adds a representative from DPW to the District of Columbia Bicycle Advisory Council. The next bill is the 257, and this is the Mandatory Protected Cycling Lane Amendment Act of 2019, and will require DDOT to construct a protected bike lane or cycle track on road segments that were recommended in the 2014 Bicycle Network District of Columbia's multimodal long-range transportation plan, and that information is linked there if anyone would like to go further and to dig into that. However, I've also identified 5 of the projects that were specified in the 2014 plan that were listed there. They're all either in the district or adjacent to the district. The next bill is 288, and that relates to, that's the Vision Zero Enhancement Omnibus. This bill is the most comprehensive and the largest of the bills. This bill essentially requires the mayor to install sidewalks on both sides of streets, connects new sidewalks to existing sidewalks, and to pave or to mark unmarked crosswalks whenever there's been road work construction based on, or any new road construction or curb construction. This one also requires DDOT to make certain information publicly available and easily searchable for ANCs, but also for community members. It requires council approval from the multimodal long-range report plans. The next bill is 292. That's known as the Curb Extensions Act of 2019, and that requires the installation of curb extensions to reduce pedestrian crossing distances when the district performs reconstruction and repaving on roadways. The Bill 293 is known as the Cyclist Safety Campaign Amendment Act, and it adds questions relating to cyclists and to the driver's license application, and requires the Department of Motor Vehicles to establish a public outreach campaign for sharing roadways. And finally, the 415 bill, known as the Vision Zero Distracted Driving Amendment. This repeals the provisions that exempt a violation of the Distracted Driving Safety Act of 2004 from the assessment of points unless the violation contributes to an accident. This form was passed as well as in committee, as well as a separate form that separated out Bill 415. I would like to move forward with the bill that includes 415 and keep that one in, since I didn't receive response from the complaints regarding that bill getting nicked off. I would gladly discuss any of these bills. For however long you'd like to talk about them, but it seems like the previous discussion at the committee hearing from the public comment went really well, and a lot of these bills have a lot of support from the cyclist community, as well as pedestrian advocacy groups, as well as businesses, and other ANCs are passing things nearly just the same. So I would like to add, I would like to make a statement that 1C is interested in pedestrian and cyclist safety, having meetings with DDOT and DPR and all these other agencies. It is, we have to pass a resolution to tell them. We can't just have a conversation. So this is showing our support for these bills, and I would like to send it to all of the committee members on the committee, as well as our council member. She is not a sponsor of all of them, and I would like to add her. I'm sure this would help her along with being.
So which committee is this in front of?
This is in the Transportation and Environment Committee, and that is chaired by Mary Che.
Okay. Well, it would be my inclination to send it to all council members, regardless of whether they're on the committee.
I have a question, because I know Commissioner Dendy was concerned about 415, and that's why we had separated it out. But it's back. Is there a separate?
Yeah, so I decided to move along with this version because 415, reading through the bills, the reasoning for possibly removing this bill relates to police abusing their power, essentially. And reading through this bill, I don't believe that this gives an opportunity for police to make those questions, but rather the person who applies points would be through the other side of the justice system, would be the courts. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to leave it. I also think that it makes a stronger statement for 1C to say that we endorse all of these bills as they were presented at the council and at the committee as one bunch.
I guess I think that it makes sense, despite Commissioner Dendy's concern about points where you don't have an accident and the increased cost to low-income drivers. I think that there's a reason for distracted driving prohibition that outweighs my concern about additional cost to those who are distracted driving, caught at distracted driving, and, you know, have increased penalties.
Yeah, and it currently is, from what I know, with a point or without a point, you're still not legally allowed to drive distracted.
Right, right.
So a police officer, I would hopefully assume, would pull a person over for driving distracted, in which case I believe that profiling with a point or without a point, there's not. I think that was the biggest issue, was police profiling and being like, oh, I'm going to use this.
I just wanted to, I wasn't sure.
No, definitely.
So I just wanted to clarify.
Cool. Yeah.
Japer, on the second page, the cheat sheet page, you have on the second bullet under amend, increase med tourist route rail and Bill 23 by July 1st.
So that is for our electric mobility devices bill that we're discussing next. And
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought,
no, it may have been mixed up in the shuffle of things, but
I thought we were talking about all three.
no, I mean, I'd be glad if we want to add the electric bill conversation to it now, or do we need to pass this first?
Let's do this separately.
Separately?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
So this came out of committee with a recommendation to pass, is that correct? Any other?
Yeah, it's about 4:15. I mean, I totally understand the contributions for the Distracted Driving Amendment Act of 2019, but I think like it's a little bit harsh on the drivers, whereas ANC once you recognizes that for distracted driving does not always cause a crash, resulting blah blah blah. It's a highly unsafe practice and should be penalized as such. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but why not also penalize the cyclist or the people who are on the scooter?
That's not what is within the scope of the legislation. The scope of the legislation that we're discussing is charging points to automobile drivers who are pulled over for distracted driving, regardless of whether or not there's an accident. That is the proposed change in the statute. And anything else would be another statute rather than this one.
All right, but thanks for the clarification. I'm sorry, I have been away for so long that
I wanted to respond to one other piece about, can I respond to one thing about Benny's statement? In 2007, that's when the iPhone came out. The last time this act was updated was 2004, so this is pre-iPhone. I guess that would have been BlackBerry, but technology has evolved so much, and even technology inside of cars.
I know.
And so this is sort of catching up to that.
Yeah, because DC is pretty behind, because I can tell you in France, it's absolutely drastic.
Yeah.
It's absolutely drastic.
Well, it's very dangerous. It's frequently more dangerous than drunk driving, but, you know.
And the other,
Oh, yeah, I know. I know, I understand.
Other question?
Okay.
Well, first, a comment, which is admittedly not within the jurisdiction of the DC Council to deal with, but I think in general is reflective of, sort of a generalized effort to say we're doing something, but it's oftentimes not very effective. With respect to Bill 23293, where we're going to require DC residents to take licensing exams that have bicyclist questions on them, does nothing about the ignorance and stupidity of Virginia and Maryland drivers.
That's true.
Unfortunately, constitutionally, we're prohibited from requiring a DC driver's license to drive in the district.
In my personal experience as a driver, I find the behavior of our neighbors to be as bad or worse than anybody with district license, especially the Uber drivers from Virginia. So, I'm not opposed to it, but it's just a general comment on what I view as the
And if we don't do it, hopefully Maryland and other jurisdictions continue to do this.
They will. Maybe
Hey, they flipped.
But this applies to everybody, right? Jumper. This applies to
let me come back for a moment.
No, just DC.
Let me come back for a moment.
But not just that.
Could you please, Benet, he's in the middle of a
Let
question.
me come back for a moment to Benedict's point. I'm a pedestrian, I'm a driver, and I have a bicycle, but I never ride it on the streets of DC because I'm too afraid to do that.
That's sad.
I just ride around. I ride around when I'm on vacation elsewhere, but not here. We have a cultural problem in this town, which is that all three groups of people are constantly at war with each other.
I'd say 4, add the scooters.
And now scooter riders too. And I believe that the basic problem is that we have a culture that, in which all 4 groups of people think it's all about me. I don't care if any of the other 3 or any of the other 2, right? It's all about me. And the problem I have with this bill is that it just exacerbates that problem. And Mr. Chairman, in response to your point, as well as Benedict, there's no reason that this bill can't be amended. And I don't have a problem with assessing points on drivers. I do have a problem with the idea that the law is blind to distracted bicycle riders and distracted scooter drivers and distracted pedestrians who are walking across an intersection or a crosswalk, looking down at their phones, crossing against the light when it's red.
Right.
And, you know.
Unfortunately, we don't license pedestrians in the district.
I
We
understand.
should probably do that.
The proportionality of damage that can be
changed to make that illegal.
So
and there's no reason why Vision Zero, whose purpose ostensibly is to cut down on pedestrian deaths, cannot address that. And so if the law is going to be amended and if the ANC is going to put its weight behind doing something about Vision Zero,
Please, Benet, don't interrupt, okay?
that if the ANC is going to put its weight behind Vision Zero, that it shouldn't address these problems too. I don't have any problem with assessing points on drivers who misbehave. But we need to have a culture in which all 4 groups of people recognize it's not all about me. It's about all of us respecting each other. I try to do that when I'm a driver. I try to do it when I'm a pedestrian. There's too many people out there who don't.
I definitely am echoing that, and I think that one of the reasons why they introduced 293, the Cyclist Safety Campaign Amendment, which requires not only, requires questions relating to the cyclists, but also requires the DMV to establish a public outreach campaign for sharing roadways. That's the biggest issue there, I think, is creating a culture where we are sharing roadways. Cars are on roads, but there's so many other things that are also on or near roads. And I think that, you can't just, they're not just passing the Distracted Driver Safety Act, or they're trying to pass numerous bills, and they're trying to pass numerous things because there does need to be structural change, and we do need to change the culture. And I think that doing it in this holistic approach, focusing on many things, and we can definitely go further. There's advocates in the room that think we could go further, and council members that think we can go further, and hopefully they introduce those types of bills. But right now I think this is a good start, and I think that our advocates need to know that there is support at the ANC level, at the neighborhood level, and we're offering this support. There's definitely more things we can do, and if you're interested in knowing more, I could hook you up with people who want to advocate even further and things that do make sense. Yeah, we do need to tear down the walls of saying, this is my, we'll get to you, Renee. We all share the roads. The bid has also had these same types of discussions, and I'm sure that they and cyclists and business owners, they want to know who has what parts of the road. And honestly, it's not anybody's road, it's all of our road. So there is an inherent and a cultural tend to value cars and car ownership more than the free ability to walk or the minimal cost to bike. And I think that ultimately it's not only just a safety issue, but an equity issue. So I think that there's room for us to grow, but this is a good start, and I would hope that we pass this.
I would also mention the proportionality of damage that a car can inflict on somebody versus a pedestrian, who most often, if they are being a distracted pedestrian, the person they're going to hurt the most is themselves, unfortunately, right? The city has also passed distracted cycling that I think is more punitive, or maybe not more punitive, but more strict than cars, right? So there's no monitoring of how loudly you play music inside of your car, or enforcement perhaps. Cyclists are not allowed to have 2 headphones in at once while cycling down the road, which I agree with. I do one in my right ear so I can hear what's happening on my left-hand side. So there are measures being put in place that they're not enforced, absolutely.
But neither is running stop signs that you see just
Right.
walking
I mean,
just walking.
People speed down the road and that's not enforced.
A list of like unenforced laws on the books of DC.
Yeah.
Well, there is definitely a disinclination on the part of DC police to do anything about bicycle, definitely no parking problems or issues that they'll do anything about. Pedestrians, bicycles, scooters, they will not take their time to enforce the rules, and that's part of the problem. But I also think that if they stood down there on the corner of L and Connecticut and started writing tickets for pedestrians who were looking at their phones, there would be an outcry.
I mean, yeah.
Because people think that it's okay to do that, and that they're special, which is sort of a DC thing. But I guess the point would be that although these measures don't address pedestrians, and pedestrians and bicyclists and scooters are doing things that are less than helpful to your goal of ultimately sharing, it seems to me that it's worth supporting these particular measures that have been put forward. And generally, ANC 1C doesn't generate the bills, we just provide support so that they feel like they can pass them.
And my only point was, I don't have any objection to any of them, with the exception of, my belief is that this last one, it just goes a little overboard, tilting the playing field.
You mean the 415?
415.
The distracted driving?
By basically saying it's all driver's fault.
Yeah, that's my.
Well, I think that goes structurally to the fact that you don't need a license in order to walk or bicycle or be on a scooter. So if there's no license, there's no enforceability in the same way that there is with autos. So there's a structural difference.
To inflict harm is so much greater in a car than on a bicycle. If I do something stupid on my bike, I'm gonna hurt myself.
Yeah, but I'm gonna end up paying.
I'm
gonna end up paying for what happens to you, even if you did something stupid.
I just, in my experience, that hasn't been the case, but we could maybe talk about that later.
There was an accident at the condo building where the alley is, where the mural is, and I don't think that guy got any retribution whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I mean, there's a crash accident report that we looked at like a week ago with DDOT, and it's also publicly available. But yeah, there's a lot of crashes that happen, and all of them relate to cars, and the deadly ones are cars. Like 95% of the fatalities are related to cars.
Yeah.
So, Benet had something that you wanted to add to this discussion?
It's about 2293, about the driver license applicant. I think there was an NPR. It looks like nationwide, cyclists are going to have to wear a helmet for security, and it's going to be mandatory because they're saying that the number of deaths for cyclists has increased more than the last 2 years, and it's now almost 1,000 deaths just for the bicycles. So, everybody, like he said, I do all of them. I bike, I drive, I use scooters, but I have a helmet, and I stop at the red light, and the car drivers are looking at me like, why is she so respectful of the law? Well, because I want to stay alive. But the thing is, bicycle also should have the helmet. They should carry.
That is the law on DC. That is a law on DC.
They don't enforce it.
I'm sorry, it's a law for children, it's not a law.
Yeah, under the age of
I don't
16.
think it should be a mandatory.
That is not within the scope of these particular pieces of legislation. I think you would wind up with a whole lot of opposition to that measure, even though I think it's a good measure. What we're dealing with and what we're trying to get dealt with now is our support of particular bills that are in front of the city council now.
Can I just wanted to make one
has had his
comment.
hand up for a minute.
All I wanted to say is, he's right. I don't think all the fault should be on the burden of the car drivers. I don't think that's right, and I understand that we're, the situation, because I practice 4 of them, but like I said, the last paragraph is a little bit harsh on the drivers.
I just wanted to make a comment, and I think the thing is that, I think that in a situation like DC where you have a growing population, changes in how many people are on the road, how many people are on bikes, how many people are walking on the sidewalks, you have to start somewhere. And that somewhere is the fact that for as long as I've been in DC, which is almost 30 years, the cars have had the roads to themselves. And so you have to start somewhere, and somewhere is education. And if it starts with licensing to get people educated, then that's a way you can do it, because to get a license, you need to be educated. The way you need to share a road with a person, the way you share a road with a motorcycle, the way you need to share a road with a bike. And so I don't think that this is as punitive as it could be. And it's not saying years or money or this or that. It's just saying that there is an incentive to not be distracted in a car. And I support this resolution.
There was a hand back.
With respect to 415, the distracted driving thing, it's already illegal, but currently, if you get pulled over for distracted driving, there's only a fine. And this is just saying that if you can also get points off your license as part of that, it's not adding anything new. It's just saying you don't have to have already hurt somebody to be dangerous operating your phone while driving the car. And I think on 293, what it really is just adding a question to the driver's license exam. It's not adding any kind of penalties or anything. It's, when new drivers, have to take the license exam, I think there's separately a bill which would also, increase how often people have to take that exam. Because I certainly know, as somebody who moved to DC as an adult with a driver's license, I did not have to take an exam in DC. But it's just to make sure that people know what the law is. And I think that making sure that people know what the law is something that I would hope that we would support.
Okay, shall we move? Commission's ready to move to a vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Electric mobility devices.
All right, so this is a bill that we heard, or actually was heard yesterday or Monday, and we're submitting testimony in order to amend it. Reading the bill, there's some glaring problem areas, And listening to the testimony that was given, it was on Monday, it seems like a lot, or some of the suggestions that some of the recommendations that we are offering to the council, they have already made, and which is good. So I'll read, essentially, it's a pretty dense bill. There was a lot of things that the commission would normally agree with. A lot of safety provisions, ensuring that scooters are to be in bike lanes whenever there are bike lanes that are appropriate. But some of the things that we're looking to change relate, and I'll just read them, fleet balancing. This in current form requires the permitted operators, which are the scooter companies, to transport a percentage of their fleet, specifically 10% of their fleet in each district. And while I believe in equity, I don't think that just putting a random 10% in each ward will actually help that. More specifically, there's really large wards, and you could put scooters in a more central location next to another ward. So essentially, Ward 1 is surrounded by numerous other wards. Those, the fleet operators could put scooters all around Ward 1 and still comply, whereas people further north in Ward 3 or Ward 4, they wouldn't have access to scooters, but they would technically fall under this requirement. So I'm suggesting that a requirement be determined by DDOT with the coordination of the DC Bicycle Advisory Council. From what I've gotten from advocates, this is something that people are hoping can change. Give it to the professionals, the people that already have the data, pickups, drop-offs, as well as looking at density figures. So I think that this is just a smarter way to ensure that people who live all throughout the district have accessibility to micro-mobility. The next part relates to removing sections that I believe Councilmember Shea has agreed to make, and those relate to the operation hours of scooters. In the current form, scooters would not be allowed or permitted to be used from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And in the current form, they would be permitted operators would be required to pick up the electric mobility devices from any public right-of-way. So one, I think anyone should be able to use these scooters throughout all time periods. You're able to walk. We need more mobility for people getting to and from work, entertainment, and to the having a workforce pick up an entire fleet and remove it from an area and then put it back into use is not how their business operates. People who pick up the scooters, they operate 24/7. They're on an independent contractor work time basis, so they're able to go pick up scooters when it works for them. And B, would to me seem impractical to pick up nearly thousands of scooters every night and then recharge them and then put them back on the roadways in the morning time. There's numerous whereas clauses as reasoning why limiting these hours for micromobility is bad. Just to hit off a few businesses. We have a lot of employers in the neighborhood, and they don't close. They close after the metro is accessible. The bus system is not always the most dependable for those hours as well. And like I said, I feel like we need to make it known that Adams Morgan is interested in making more transportation accessible, especially micromobility, rather than less. So we would hope that would be eliminated from the bill. The next section relates to scooter corrals being placed in bids. So in the current version, the bill requires one scooter corral to be placed in the bid, and I don't think, and other commissioners hopefully would agree that that is not ambitious enough. There's a lot of scooters pretty much everywhere at certain points of time in the day, and requiring multiple corrals in bid areas will help with coordination. And like I said, I don't think one is enough. Most bids, and I'm sure we'll hear from Kristen on what types of deployments they already have for scooter corrals. So
might I suggest, while we're on this point,
yeah,
that you add the numeral 1 in the paragraph recommends to amend the measure from 1 to 3.
Yep, I see it now. Thank you. So I would hope to increase that. It seems at least working in my bed. I can't speak with others about others and the relationship they have, but they seem eager to find a place to put these scooters rather than along everywhere. And I think that clearly defined scooter corrals, I think that's a good thing for helping making them more manageable for pedestrians, but also for trying to park other things such as motorcycles and even cars if they're parked in the street. The next amendment relates to micromobility or the electric mobility devices being equipped with tamper-proof bell and horn systems. Currently in the bill, it only references lights. However, there are multiple models that have a tamper-proof bell horn system, and from what I've heard from advocates, this is an easy add to the bill as well. The next relates to transitioning operators' fleets from a battery replacement model, or from a scooter replacement model to a battery replacement model. And this is a little bit more technical, but essentially you have people that drive around DC to pick up the scooters and take them to another location to charge them. This is the scooter replacement model. A battery replacement model is one where instead of picking up the entire scooter, they're actually able to replace a removable battery. So instead of having these box vans or cars driving around, it seems that this type of model would allow for even cyclists to have a battery pack and drive around or ride around and change these batteries. So for numerous reasons, this seems like a good idea. My biggest concern is that with these types of chargers, or they call them, what are they?
I don't know.
No, the people who...
Companies has a different name for the people.
Yeah, so I'll just use charger as like the general term, but they, I feel like they mirror the FedEx and the UPS trucks, and essentially they park in illegal spots and then wait. They search the area to pick up their scooters, and I don't think that that's fair. That's not fair. UPS and FedEx, that's a part of doing business in DC, and I don't want our Lyft companies and our Bird scooters to be like, this is a cost of doing business. We're gonna require independent contractors to get a box truck and then also get tickets for parking illegally because there's just not a space. So this transition from a scooter replacement model to a battery replacement model is hopeful to stem that problem. The next provision is to require permitted operators to prove engagement with chargers to follow local traffic laws. So as I previously mentioned, and also permits DDOT to fine permitted operators for the infraction. So instead of having the infractions go towards just the charger, also go towards Lyft or go towards Bird. This provision was, I think we'll probably need further, not necessarily the discussion, but I don't know how enforceable, as there's at least from what I've seen, not necessarily a mechanism for this, but I would like to make a statement that we're not trying to hurt the people who are trying to do their jobs. We're trying to ensure that the people who have and manage these companies are able to do so in a neighborly and communicative manner. So my thought process on that is to punish the big guy instead of the little guy. So I think that might be more of a statement rather than enforcement. And then the final piece is something that some permitted operators already do, and that relates to incentivizing users for future discounted rates by incentivizing the user to park in corrals, near bike racks, and other designated areas using geofencing and location technology. So GPS has definitely increased in technology, and they're able to now determine exactly where your scooter is parked. And I believe Jump and they use this system where if you park in a designated area that has been tracked with DDOT, then they would get either a free activation fee or a discounted rate. So I would like to bring that model to DC, as I think it would help better organize and hopefully eliminate scooter litter and really help create a culture of defining where to park these. This is in combination with the rest of the other measures, so offering more places to park them with corrals. So there's numerous ways to help deal with scooter litter, and this is just one that Jump has used to help eliminate their, or not eliminate, but alleviate their community outrage of scooters.
Two questions. Again, this is the Transportation and Environment Committee?
Correct.
And my other question is, do you include the cheat sheet as part of what I send along?
I thought that was more for just everyone here.
Okay.
I can if you'd like. Probably not. And, oh yeah.
How has this changed since it was considered at the PCT?
So
what were the edits?
So I thought that there were just minor edits, and then the only one that was up for question was the.
I can tell you the one that I made.
And
Which one was it? Oh, go ahead.
I just asked mainly, I appreciate the description and you going through it, I think it's probably useful, but just as maybe a point of process, since we did cover this at the PZT meeting, spending 10 minutes going through it line by line, and the stuff that we discussed, I don't see it having been changed, so I don't know what the utility is.
What was the
charger?
Yeah, I'm not seeing the change reflected in here.
Just in terms of our time, being most effective in time, I would like to see, these full ANC meetings be devoted to the work that was done in PCT rather than just going through the same the same thing that we saw at PZT.
What were the, I apologize, I don't have.
Well, the one change that I had made coming out of PZT is on the second page, about halfway down, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Recommends to amend the measure by requiring permitted operators to transition their fleet from scooter replacement to battery replacement models, although there was talk about adding in a date. David had given some good feedback on that. The other thing that I still disagree with is about, I agree with it, but I just don't know what the reality of it is finding the operators versus the chargers for infractions.
Yeah, so I would like to keep that as, I want them to know that that's what we would want, ideally. I don't know. I'm up for consideration for it, but I don't want it to look like we're trying to be punitive with the people who are just trying to make some money.
Yeah, I understand. My concern is that there's an entire department, the DC Department of For-Hire Vehicles, that handles Uber and Lyft drivers and infractions that they have, and I would rather us do some advocacy with them and their advisory council to see if there's a way that we could, how are they reporting that data back to Uber and Lyft? I just, they haven't solved that on the car problem.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel realistic to me, but I guess I don't I'm fine to leave it.
And then what was the other change, Michaela? I'm sorry.
I don't remember, did you already talk about the battery replacement?
Yeah, battery replacement.
Mm,
I might have notes.
yeah, I'm not. Did you?
I didn't have my notes with me, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I would be interested if there's any friendly amendments or to remove. I mean, I don't want to remove the scooter replacement or battery replacement models. Wasn't there like a verbiage that we
The idea was to provide a deadline by which they would convert to like a more efficient model.
Right.
But not being prescriptive about what the model is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm down to have that as, I would be able to make that amendment change. I'm sorry for not incorporating that already.
I'm just thinking of our time, you know.
It's gone. Okay, so I will make that change to say by requiring permitted operators to transition their fleet to a more environmentally efficient battery replacement model.
Yeah.
Just more environmentally efficient model. You don't need to have battery replacement in there, that's the point.
Yeah.
What section are you on?
It's paragraphs. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, by requiring permitted operators to transition their fleet to a more efficient scooter model.
Yeah.
Is there a moment?
There's a moment, yes.
So I would request that the commission consider a possible further amendment. I read what was contained in the bill, and it said, I agree with almost every single thing, except that scooters would be allowed to go 6 miles per hour on sidewalks. And I don't think anything motorized should be allowed on a sidewalk, except motorized wheelchairs, medical wheelchairs, you know, because that's a reasonable thing for folks who can't get around by walking. But I can, you know, even I'm getting old, and I don't want somebody bumping into me at 6 miles an hour, knocking me over and breaking my hip. 6 miles an hour is plenty fast, you know, and so I just don't think anything motorized should be allowed on the public sidewalk.
Well, there's a few motorized things that are legally allowed on sidewalks, so.
But this could change that.
Like I park my Vespa on the sidewalk legally, and it's motorized.
But you don't drive it, you just.
This says
put
drive.
it up.
This says drive.
Right.
On sidewalks at 6 miles an hour.
Yeah.
For scooters only. But, I mean, I think that this needs to be fleshed out. Like, okay, you're gonna allow scooters at 6, well then how fast can Vespas go, and how fast can
Or e-bikes.
all the other different things go, you know, and it's just, it's not right. I
So-
mean, pedestrian, you've done a lot of things showing your concern for pedestrians. Well, how about this thing for pedestrians? And in Adams Morgan, we happen to have very busy sidewalks because we have so many restaurants and a lot of visitors to our neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely. So I think a part of this relates to outreach, not necessarily from, or on all sides. So from the DC side, but also from the operator side. They need to ensure, you know, whenever they do the app agreement, you know, I get notifications multiple times. It's like, hey, remember, wear a helmet. Hey, make sure to not ride on the sidewalk. So they definitely need more of that. But I'm against not allowing a scooter to be on a sidewalk. And for a very good reason. In order for me to scoot down to the Wilson building, I would take the 15th Street cycle track, and that's great. But then when Donald Trump closes the park right in front of the White House, I have to get onto a major road that has, you know, 5 lanes of traffic, I'm not gonna get on that. It's a track that pumps out right to a major street. And so at that point, I do get on the sidewalk. I walk because I have red hair and I'm sure someone will find me or see me riding on the sidewalk. But there are safety concerns, and I think that there, in the bill, I do believe it does state something to the effect of, if there's a bike lane, use the bike lane. And that's exactly how I feel. I use the bike lane, but I don't think that, I think that either ticketing or pulling someone over for riding on a scooter on a sidewalk is kind of, I don't want to say a waste of time, but it seems too petty. And it seems like if we really want to talk about pedestrians being safe, then we should really start talking about vehicles. It's not the scooters. I know, but still the same. There's not pedestrians.
Could we please have one person speak at a time, and as much as possible, direct comments back and forth? We're getting really late, and it's concern to me that we have a number of other items.
One thing I'd like to say about that. So the bill envisions 6 miles per hour as a speed limit on the sidewalk for scooters. Who's going to enforce that?
Exactly.
It begs for enforcement because they can go 15 miles an hour, right? On level ground.
Well, they can't now. This bill would increase it to 15 miles an hour. It's like 11 or 12 now.
But anyway, and I just think it's logical, and it goes along with many of the other things that you as a commission have supported to do with these different,
I agree, but we
use
don't
of bikes, bike lanes, all the rest of it.
Just hold on a second, Shaper. Are you done with what your request
There's
is?
one further point, and that is that the city does historically draw a distinction between the downtown business district and the residential areas of the rest of the city. And that's mainly to do with bicycles, but it could be to do with something else.
I believe it is included in this bill, from what I read, that scooters are not allowed on the sidewalks in that central business district core.
I think that's already the case.
Yeah.
It is. They have, on the curb cuts of going into the central business district.
Dismount zone.
Yeah.
Is there a question in the back there?
I was partly going to say that I'm a grad student at Virginia Tech in Boston, and I actually, as part of a class last spring, did a study of scooter riders in Rosslyn and their attitudes and feelings about riding these things. And one of the things that we found is that riders don't want to ride on the sidewalks. They, given the opportunity to rank where they would prefer to ride, the only thing that they would prefer to ride, that they ride sidewalks in preference to, is in lanes shared with cars. It's basically, if we want to get scooter riders off of sidewalks, the solution is to give them places like bike lanes that they will ride instead, and they will ride there instead, because it's not pleasant to ride on the sidewalk. With respect to the section about allowing DDOT to fine operators for the infractions of people picking up the scooters, I really like the idea. My concern is that these chargers frequently are not only are they independent contractors, but they're frequently working for multiple vendors at a time. So you'll see one person picking up for Bird and Lyft and several of them. I believe locally, I think Spin is the only one that actually employs their own staff to do that. So that might get complicated. But in general, I do think, having that, liability for the bad actions of those drivers go back to the vendors that encourage it, I think is a good idea.
Chris?
the increasing the required scooter corrals to be placed in bids. We have this grant from DDOT. We don't know what the total value is going to be yet, nor is it signed by the director yet, even though the fiscal year started October 1st. This stuff all takes months. So our ability to install these scooter corrals would be limited to whatever amount is in that grant. So this is aspirational. Maybe it could be 3, maybe it'll be 2. You know, that's all going to be dependent on the size of the grant. So I just want you all to know.
Who gets paid for? Who's getting paid for the corral?
We'll do the work. We'll install them. We have the MOU we have is for scooter corrals and bike racks. And you know, once we know what that amount will be, we'll be able to say like, okay, this is how many we're going to be able to do. But we don't know that yet.
Okay.
We don't have a signed MOU yet.
My problem with this is that it really feels like this is written from the perspective of ANC 1C wants to make sure that people who use scooters are not adversely affected by this bill. And it seems to me that there's at least a substantial number of community members here who would have concerns about measures in the bill that are not addressed in this. And that's my biggest problem with it.
I think there are enough issues that I have about individual sections in here that my original thing that I was most concerned about was the overnight usage, and it sounds like that's been taken care of. And the rest of this, I think, needs some work, and I'm just not comfortable supporting it in this form. I want to see how Mary Che's bill goes forward, and I'm glad that she came around on the after hours. As for the rest, you know, I still have questions about a lot of the things in here, so.
So I guess the question would be, depending if there is like stuff that you feel is important to get in front of the committee, it doesn't seem like you have the votes to be able to pass this as is, but you could table it if you wanted to do further work on it and bring it back to us, I think.
I mean, I'm kind of upset about that. That's unfortunate, but I mean, yeah, this was written. I am a scooter user, so that's why I introduced this. And I saw the things that were against for scooter users. I would say that the bills, I mean, and I asked PZT, should we include things that were in support of the bill to make it more well-rounded, I guess. And these are just the things that I thought we could really hone in on and say, hey, these are specific changes that would work best to, you know, 1C. And I also feel like if these weren't things that we wanted to discuss, like, we could get rid of them. And I felt like I tried to relay that. It definitely is, you know, a comprehensive resolution, and definitely the biggest win from this is getting rid of the cease hours of operation, but I definitely feel like there's some other good things in here. As a scooter user, if they don't consider, you know, the bell thing, that's kind of frustrating. I don't want to have a broken bell or not even a bell on a scooter, and I don't quite remember hearing that in testimony that was given. The fleet balancing, I'm sure they will be able to work out fleet balancing, but I want us to be able to make a statement and say that we do want transportation equity.
I had no problem with supporting transportation equity, but it feels to me that unlike some of the other measures that you brought forward, this is really imbalanced when you consider that one of the primary things they're talking about is speed of scooters on sidewalks, and it doesn't address that at all. And that's an area that is of substantial concern to a number of my constituents. And that and bicycles. They hate bicycles up on the sidewalks here.
So, I mean,
I just...
Unless there's a recommendation for a change to that, then that's why I didn't see a need to put it in the resolution. That would be something I would have put in the resolution in support of. As previously mentioned, I I think it's okay to have scooters on sidewalks in areas that, it's not safe for a person who is on a scooter to get in between from point A to point B. I also believe in dismount zones, but yeah, we don't have to pass this bill or resolution. It's up completely.
Well, it does seem like the principal thing that you were concerned about that you brought forth in the committee, that I think you have a whole lot of support from the committee and the other commissioners, was about the hour limitation, which was reprehensible, and
yeah.
Who was paid to think that one up? But these other ones don't seem to be of that magnitude as far as affecting people who use scooters. And I do think that there is a significant portion of our particularly less than scooter using crowd that are really concerned about the use of scooters on our sidewalks. And it just seems to me difficult.
Are we willing to show that support to the council member in some form of resolution?
I just think in this form, I'm just not, I think it needs more work. If we want to go back and create, I don't know.
This is not an easy read. And I was glad that you had that little cheat sheet. But the problem is that we send this down to the city council, and they're not going to be willing to invest the time to read this well enough for it to have a significant impact. And I'd really like to make sure that what we send them is stuff that they understand and that they can respect our position on.
So if we don't pass something today, obviously, not obviously, but we wouldn't be on record for the committee hearing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't show our support for something like this, because it hasn't been passed out of committee and it also hasn't gone through COW yet. So there still is an opportunity to voice support. I feel like I spent a lot of time in this, so I want to get.
I know, and there's a lot of, no, I understand that, but I do think that I could be wrong, but I don't think you have the votes to pass it. And it's getting late. So the question is whether you would prefer to table this or have a vote on it and move on.
How long will the record stay open? Do we know?
I believe it closes.
They say at the end of the hearing usually, verbally.
Yeah, I believe it. This one closes. I have it on the notes here. It closes in a week. We wouldn't have time
for that hearing.
For this hearing, yeah.
But, and like you said, there will be further opportunities. It's not like this bill is being passed in final form yet,
Right.
so there will be further opportunities to comment on this bill.
And as Commissioner Wright said, there's already been some really good change that's happened just even in the last 48 hours. And there could be additional, and I'd like to see a resolution that shows support for some of those changes, because this one is still reflective of 9E, E1D, and E being in here.
Yeah, I'll table it.
We can table it and see whether you can come up with something that and I would really encourage you to take whatever draft they're on now and work from that as opposed to the old one. And I believe at the committee, I pointed out to you that they had done something similar to that when we all came together, Kristen and others, down to testify, and then suddenly they substitute a totally different bill that is really infuriating. But okay, so we will table that, and you will get back and let us know if you're going to be offering an alternative down the line. The next item is.
Can I just pull it?
He can pull it, I believe. As far as I'm concerned, he can pull it. Resolution requesting DPW, ABRA, DOH, DCRA conduct nighttime enforcement in Adams Morgan, which I believe is something that was put in by Amir.
It was presented by Amir. I presented it on his behalf, and I'm happy to do so again today.
Okay, cool.
So this resolution acknowledges the work that DPW, ABRA, Department of Health, and DCRA do for our community, but acknowledges that many of the institutions, including DPW, don't conduct nighttime enforcement, and for many of our businesses, nighttime is sort of their prime operating hours. And that there's been evidence of, so there's a short list of violations that I won't read through at length, but you can read. There's evidence that there's not adequate enforcement during nighttime hours, so certainly, while the title of this says in Adams Morgan, this would be reflective of a change, certainly that would need to happen across the city. I don't think it could just happen in Adams Morgan, which is a point that Brian helpfully raised at the Public Services and Environment Committee. So we do request that there's enforcement of settlement agreements, citywide regulations and laws, and that those enforcements happen just as often in the evening time for districts that have evening activity as they do during the day.
One other question. I assume that he is thinking that this will be sent to each of these agencies?
That's correct.
And also to the council members or not?
I'd have to confirm with him, but I believe just the agencies.
Okay.
Somebody raised the question at the most recent PSE meeting. I think it might have been Brian again, who was really helpful when we talked through this, about, I'm sorry, I'm so tired. Raised the question, I'll come back to it.
There would have to be a pilot program. There's not like current enforcement or monies to.
Well, there is enforcement by ABRA, for example.
Yeah,
DOH came out for one nighttime sweep with us and then never did any follow through with the hookah bars.
Yeah.
There is continual problem with DOH not checking on kitchen facilities during the prime working hours at night. It's one of those where they need to have better staffing for their agencies. If their agencies are charged with enforcement, they have to be able to come out and do things like, for example, I don't know why DCRA doesn't ever come out and do head counts of people going into oversubscribed venues.
One of the things, if I could, sorry, just before, one of the questions that Brian raised that I thought was an interesting point and just wanted to explain is that this isn't kind of coming out of nowhere. Also, this is the outcome of a organized walkthrough of Adams Morgan that Commissioner Rani did with each of these agencies. I think DDOT might have also been part of that too, because
DDOT does the, yes.
They're the sidewalk cafe,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the oversight hearings for all these agencies are happening in February and March.
Mm-hmm.
So that would probably be the right opportunity to bring up these concerns. This is millions of dollars and staff time we're talking about here, so that needs to be asked for by council members and included in budgets. So, there's an opportunity for that in 2021 budget, but, until like that happens,
It should be being done.
Right, I mean, it's like how the DC council just funded more DPW workers for more ticketing purposes, right? Like we've talked about this at length tonight, there's way more activity happening on the parts of every different type of road user that's not being enforced by DPW, so it would be similar to that, yeah.
Yeah, my only comment. Yeah, that would be my only comment is that we direct this to the legislators, because I think that we will need funding and probably, I assume some type of pilot or something. I don't know, it sounds like a good opportunity to start a conversation, or I guess continue a conversation. I am not 100% excited about businesses that are already quite overburdened by bureaucracies in Adams Morgan, to have additional enforcement but being able to have the opportunity to call the Department of Health and be like, this is gross, this needs to be changed, that would be helpful. So,
well, I think the argument is, and I think the argument is that, is not that this is meant to be a burden, but that businesses that are in their prime operating hours don't fall within the app. So we just have a different kind of subset of businesses here.
Yeah, totally.
Not entirely, but
for sure.
Right, but the only way that this is going to happen is if it happens citywide.
Yes.
Right.
Advocacy.
Which is a lot.
Although they seem to be able to discreetly consider nightclub areas for their, nightclub czar and for their police enforcement activities.
Well, that's
so you
what
would
I
think
would
that
like
they
to
could
see
certainly say that Department of Health hire another person who is available during evening hours to go to the particular neighborhoods that seem to have problems during evening hours. That doesn't seem to me to be an administrative problem. That seems to be an administration that's not looking to do their job. But
well, and for a number of years consecutively, there was Operation Adams Morgan, which was a multi-agency thing that,
In the summer, yeah.
right.
you know, that tried to, you know, it was mainly MPD, but it was also ABRA and DOH and others to kind of get it under control, not let it get out of hand.
So, is there anyone who is opposed to this resolution passing as written?
Is that how we're gonna vote?
Let's go for it. All those in favor of this resolution, did this come out of committee?
Yes.
Okay. For the ANC 1C resolution requesting various agencies conduct increased nighttime enforcement in Adams Morgan, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes 5-0.
All right, I'm gonna go really quickly into the next one.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is another look at the grant guidelines and policy statement. We've discussed, and the primary opposition, that's a strong word, but the primary kind of disagreement was between Commissioner Arani and myself, and we have worked this out. He's not here to talk about that, but I can tell you he did. I don't know. The things that have changed that we'd like to recommend is about funding limits, that we create 3 kind of tiers of grants. So 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000, which gives organizations different numbers to work towards. I can talk a little bit about why we're trying to go a little bit higher. The second change is about a proactive call for grants. So we did away with the grant cycles that were under discussion previously. What we would like to recommend is that there's 2 sort of proactive calls to the community for grants in February and June that will allow us to make those grants within the timelines. We will accept grants outside of that, but that will hopefully, when people know deadlines, they're a little bit more likely to act. On page 2, the third change that I wanted to mention is that we did some substantial changes to how people submit grants. We've already approved an online form. We also wanted to change the grant application window to 2 weeks prior to the meeting versus 3 weeks, and no longer requiring 8 hard copies. We're also not requiring presentation at the PSE committee meeting, although it will continue to be encouraged. All other items remain the same. The one thing I did want to mention about budget, and we talked about this at the last PSE meeting, is that we continue to carry a balance of tens of thousands of dollars, and we would like to try to put some of this money proactively back into the community. We get almost $4,000 a quarter from the DC government for our expenses, which more than covers what we have. We're not spending, this money is not doing our community any good just sitting in a bank account, not even accruing any interest, or barely accruing interest. And so we see grants as a good opportunity to invest some of this money back into our community. And we see the proactive calls for grants as being a vehicle to do that. And should we get back to a point where we are spending our money in a more kind of in and out way, we would then we'd recommend readdressing the grant limits. We have no need for a rainy day fund at the ANC. If anybody has one that they want to mention to me, I'd love to hear it. But
my van needs repairs. Oh, sorry.
Dennis James van. But we don't need a rainy day fund. If our funding goes away, the ANC goes away, and that's a bigger issue that the DC government would have to figure out, right? So it just seems crazy to me. So that's what we would like to propose.
Okay. Did that come out of the committee?
It did, with approval.
Okay. Yes.
So, Richard, are you saying that the wording of these major paragraphs, like 3, 4, 5, 6, are the same as they're in the current proposal?
All of the changes are reflected in track changes. There's nothing.
I'm just on the website right now because I wasn't able to be at that meeting.
Would you like? I thought the
time
copies.
to make sense of the
I'm
track
sorry. I
changes.
thought that the copies were in the back. Yeah, and it's been Yeah.
It's just in black and white on my funny little phone.
Got it.
Okay, so, anyway, the big thing,
The substantial changes, if you're looking at the document that Michaela just handed to you, item 2 is funding limits and timelines. Okay, that's a bad idea. 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000. The second item under number 2 is about the timeline.
okay, so what shows on the agenda is funding limit grants shall, and then nothing further says. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. That's
Are you
under
linked?
one, under 1, after application paragraph, and it says funding limit and
I don't know. Is this what's on the, I
It's on
don't,
the agenda for tonight on the ANC, on your website.
I think
it's
the
not
correct one.
it's not showing track changes.
I've got it, so I just.
Yeah, I see you
clicked
in
on the
here.
email.
I don't know how to do
The list
this.
update, and it's-
I didn't see that. I was just went straight to the website. If you go to the website.
I can see Michaela in here though, if
Yeah.
we're looking. For some reason yours is not displaying
Maybe
the
it's
track
wrong.
changes. I'm really sorry, I don't know why.
It looks like, anyway, so
I thought I linked it as a PDF because to avoid the track change issue that we ran into a couple months ago, but anyway, if you look at this, I can walk you through it, so.
it just looked like a hell of a lot of verbiage.
So there were a number
As
of
opposed to,
instances
like,
where I
making it
did,
more streamlined.
we actually cut quite a bit. The one thing that I did also try to do was to just eliminate extensive lists of capital letters to make things more bulleted, to try to make it a little bit easier. We've gotten so much feedback about how onerous this process is that it's barely worth it. So there's a couple instances of that, but the real substantial changes, and I'm happy to talk through it line by line, but the substantial changes are about the funding amounts, the timeline, and having a more proactive call for grants, which we hope will encourage more people to apply.
That was my main thing, that it just said, it shall, blank.
Yeah, no, I don't know, I'm really sorry, I don't know why.
Correctly on the phone for some reason.
Can I show you? It's saying, it's just showing you what's in black text. It's not showing you the red text. But I don't know why.
Maybe my phone's not up to it.
I can send you a PDF if you want to read it. Any other questions?
All those in favor of the motion, the resolution, please, in the resolution to change the rules, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion passes. Unfortunately, we still have one more addition to the agenda that I have not even had the time to look at. But my understanding is that Commissioner Dendy asked that the resolution in support of ATU Local 689 trans dev striking workers
Yes.
be brought in, and I believe that she talked with you about it.
Yeah. Well,
We need an initial.
Oh, yes. It's a concern. She was unaware of the situation 10 days prior to the date of the November meeting, but she hopes that we can see the urgency of the matter, that it's a day-by-day loss of wages that WMATA employees are facing. So that's the reason for the urgency.
They've been on strike since October 24th, and will be prospectively.
Right. 12 hours a day since October 24th.
See, my problem with this is I don't feel that it's within my competency and skill to be able to determine whether or not WMATA should cancel its contract and bring the facility back in-house. And I understand that it is somewhat confusing, and there seem to be a number of articles in the paper about it, mostly about how unpleasant it's making the commute for some people in Virginia who already had to deal with the metro problems from the rebuild.
I think what Damiana's effort is that WMATA is setting a precedence of privatization. Transdev is a French company. Under that agreement, Metro bus drivers who are driving the exact same routes, the exact same buses, make $14 less an hour than direct employees and have higher costs for health insurance plans. They also do not receive the pension that WMATA drivers receive, but instead have a retirement plan with a match. So it's not.
And what's strange to me is the same day that this came in from Damiana, I got a solicitation. I don't know if it was on the listserv, but it was, we need more bus drivers. And
yeah.
Somehow it seems to me that the economics are, if they can't get enough people to drive these buses because they're not paying them a sufficient amount, that the market takes care of that. But I don't know. I don't know enough about it to feel like I'm comfortable, and it's something that, although there is some potential impact on Ward 1, my understanding of the strike has to do with Virginia. Totally out in Virginia. So I just don't feel like this is one of those things that we should be weighing in on, much as I normally have solidarity for all things union. It feels like I'm not in a place to be able to do that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know very much about it. I offered to introduce it for her, but I can't speak to those concerns.
Right.
So.
Other thoughts?
I agree.
We could table it until she's able to talk about it if it's still ongoing. She may be able to do a better job of bringing that to life. I'm sorry to let you down, Damiana, if you're watching.
No. I'm not sure she'd have a response for me on it. Because there are some real, it seems to be a very sneaky and convoluted thing, so I'm not quite sure. But at any rate. Motion to adjourn is so welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you folks who hung out till the end, particularly those who aren't married to one of the people on the commission. So that would be 3 of you.